initial presentation. Jenny?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. Before we start the budget workshop for fiscal year 2021, I wanted to inform you that Ron and I have attended many webinars regarding budgeting for this fiscal year. Each webinar states the same thing. This next fiscal year will be very fluid and that we will have to review our projections and adjust at least quarterly. The League of California Cities is projecting a 10% revenue loss in sales tax, real property tax, transfer tax, and transportation taxes. Property tax will not have an impact immediately, but will likely see a decrease in this revenue by fiscal year 21-22. We are tracking all our COVID-19 expenses and have a pending application with Cal OES requesting reimbursement for our costs. We unfortunately do not currently qualify for CARES Act funding since our city's population is under 500,000. This budget we are presenting requires the city to expend $814,000 in reserves. And I'm trying to share my screen, but it's not allowing me to.
Tony, will you allow her to share her screen?
I'm trying to share my screen, but it's not allowing me.
Is everybody else hearing the double
Tony,
audio?
Allow her to share her screen.
We are now. Yes.
You guys are hearing double audio?
Hearing the double audio? Allow her to share her screen.
We are now. Yes.
You guys are hearing double audio?
Hearing the double audio?
Yeah, you got a video echo. Hey, Jenny, how much have we expended in COVID expenses? How much did we apply for?
We haven't submitted an application yet. We're waiting for the event to be over with, and then we will submit.
For those, Tony, and I know your audio's off, but for those that we only were getting the double feedback when I think it's cell phone connections. You muted yourself, the W audio has stopped.
Got it figured out.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Jenny, you should be able to share now. There you go.
Okay, Jenny, you should be able to share your screen now.
Yes, it still says host disabled participant screen sharing. We can continue without the screen sharing if you'd like. Everyone has the budget worksheets attached to the agenda.
Okay, I'm good, Jenny.
Okay. All right, so let's look at page 1. The department is requesting a little over 7 million in revenue. $1 million of that is in grant support. So actually we're looking at a general fund budget of 6 million. We do need to add 15,500 on item line 001-000-31128. I mistakenly left that out. We also need to update the DOJ bulletproof vest grant to 2,000. So there'll be a slight adjustment to that revenue. Does anybody have any questions regarding the general fund revenue? We will move on to under revenue. We are also looking at TUT measure A. This will likely increase to 600,000. Right now I just have the 400,000 in as an estimate. Okay, we're moving on to page 3, which is city council expenses. Our modified budget last year was 159,000. This year we're requesting 130,000. Does anybody have any questions regarding the city council expenses?
What specifically got cut on that, Jenny?
That would be membership dues and subscriptions. ESCOG was lowered to 5,000 and we added a new account line for it.
Didn't we cut out travel as well?
Travel is,
It was lowered.
yes,
Lowered.
it was lowered by half.
Jenny, you can try sharing now.
Try,
Shed light
okay.
if you want. There you go.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes. I can
Okay.
see.
All right, so
So,
we are on city council currently.
yeah. One of the things that I kind of feel should be accurately reflected is the retiree health insurance, because I know we split that out in that now I think it's all collated in admin, but it all comes from different departments. And I think it'd be useful to show it that way.
Would you guys like me to move to admin expenses? Are we done with city council?
Laura, you're muted.
Okay,
Yeah, I did that on purpose. So
okay,
you
we are
don't
moving.
have my birds and dogs and, sorry.
All right, we're moving on to administration. Stephen, would you like to address the retired?
I mean, it just seems a little disingenuous to throw all of the retiree health insurance that we're paying into admin, because it makes it seem like we are just spending a ridiculous amount on admin when all of those came from different departments and they were all thrown together there. And I think it would be useful to retain them in the other departments, because those are the departments that incurred the expense.
We'll be happy to break that out.
Unless there are any objections from anyone else. Yeah.
Okay. And our modified budget for fiscal year 1920 was 1.9 million. The department is requesting 1.8 this year. The biggest reduction was PARS and the OPED insurance. We also reduced travel. And we also moved professional technical services. We moved legal fees to another category.
And Jenny, is this correct in assuming that the PERS unfunded liability that we're contributing is the minimum that we can, or that we're required to contribute by law?
Yes.
Okay.
If there are no further questions, I'll move on. Okay. We'll go on to finance. The modified budget for 1920 was 366,000, and our request for this year is 286,000. The biggest increase there would have been PERS employer, and that's because I'm a tier 2 employee, so those benefits went up. And the biggest reduction would have been professional technical services. That includes fees for the audit for this year and for Cindy services.
And we expect not to need any of that next year, is that correct?
Correct. Hopefully our audit is not as complicated as 1819.
I mean, I thought one of the main reasons of moving to Cassell is that it would make these audits easier. And so I guess the reason it's been such a sticking point this year is because of the transition to Cassell. So we'll see. I hope that's right.
Yes. If there's no further questions, I'll move on to the treasurer. It's pretty basic. The modified budget for last year was 1,850. This year it's 1,434. Okay, and then I will move on to legal. This is where we moved from admin. We removed the legal to its own department code. It was in prior years included. What looks like in 17-18, they had a budget line item for it. So we're moving it back here, unless you guys would prefer it to be moved back to admin.
No, I think it makes sense to have it on its own, since before it was just under the nebulous like professional tech services, and this makes it clear.
Let me just interrupt for a moment, Jenny.
Yes.
Logistical matter. If photos from Zoom are covering up the right-hand column for you, the green column, you can put the arrow on the top picture and you'll get a band that opens up at the top. You can drag that anywhere on your screen to uncover those numbers.
Okay. Moving on to buildings and grounds. The modified budget for this fiscal year was 165,000. This year we're requesting 134,000. Our biggest savings there was our capital improvement. Does anyone have any questions regarding this? Okay, on to elections. Robin told me before the meeting that this expense may go up, but currently we have it budgeted at 2,700.
When we
Moving
say
on.
it might go up, do we have an idea of like ballpark, like double it, 10 times, or?
I didn't get that information from Robin yet. It depends on how the election, she probably doesn't know herself. It depends on how they proceed with the election. If she did state if we have multiple days for election, then the cost, staffing costs will go up.
Oh, right.
Right.
Okay.
It could double.
Okay.
Okay. And this is the community promotions. Last year, the adopted budget was 188,000. We are requesting it to lower to 47,000. And we're also recommending changing how we award this. We are we're recommending creating 2 grant submission deadlines, with the first deadline in July and then a second deadline in January. Staff would collect the grant proposals and then have City Council review and award them. There is a possibility of increasing the funding at mid-year if our revenues are significantly greater than what was initially budgeted. Although funding the 814,000 shortfall should be our first priority. Does anyone have any comments regarding this? This is also, I determined this amount by just cutting it as about 25% of what was awarded last year.
Sounds good.
All right, we are moving on to the police department. Our modified budget last year was 3.1 million. Our department request this year is 2.7 million. What is not included in this is the police department is likely going to need a new air conditioner. It's the rough estimate on it is 18K, but we would like to add that to the budget line, present it to City Council at a later date when we definitely have to replace it.
And is a lot of the reduction from this just the fact that we're paying the minimum of OPEB, or?
That helps, but also the hiring freeze. We are not backfilling officers that have left.
Okay, but that, of course, paying the minimum for OPEB is basically passing the buck to the next year or so. Yeah.
Yes. It doesn't go away. We still have to pay it. We're just deferring it.
Right.
2 police officers had left, 1 sergeant, 1 officer. Well, 1 sergeant plus an officer was promoted to the SRO position. There's another officer that's in process of being vetted to possibly move to Inyo County Sheriff's Department. If that happens, then we will backfill the SRO position, but we'll still be 2 people down.
We will move on to the fire department. The modified budget for this year was 462,000. We're recommending 356,000 this year. If there's no questions regarding that, I'll move on. The biggest cost savings is not funding the capital equipment replacement and capital improvements.
And is that something that we're contractually supposed to do because of the fire district JPA?
We are, but I believe we've talked to the rural fire department and they understand our financial situation. Joe could speak more on that.
Yeah, the fire district is completely on board. They understand the financial implications of no TOT or TUT, so they're pausing all capital purchases until they're also able to step up because they have a little bit of savings. And then like Jenny stated earlier, is they're not expecting a downfall until next year. So.
Okay, we'll move on to building. This fiscal year, the modified budget was 68,000. This year, we're requesting 62,000. Moving on to street maintenance. The modified budget last year was 822, or this year was 822,000. This fiscal year, we're requesting 230,000. The biggest savings comes from salaries, where we are able to move a majority of the salaries to the gas tax. Does anyone have any questions regarding this?
Plus, we're down 3 positions in Public Works, which affects this as well.
Okay, moving on to Parks and Rec. Modified budget this fiscal year was 603,000. This fiscal year, we're requesting 754,000. The biggest jump for that is the playground, but that would be reimbursed, and that is included in our general fund revenue. It's one of the grants. We also have a slight increase to salaries, and that was due to Dan's promotion.
Has there been any word on that reimbursement for the grant? Any communication?
The contractor is putting off finishing the project to July 1st, so the expense will hit next year. So we're budgeting total expense next year and the income from the grant next year, but we do not have word yet. Jenny, could you scroll up just a little bit to see the bottom? Yeah. So if you take that 200,000 away, it's 553,000 compared to 603 of the adjusted budget for this year, compared to 735,000 that was budgeted initially. So it is, without that capital project, it is down as well. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, we'll move on to planning department. The modified budget for this fiscal year was 131,000. Next fiscal year is 906,000. The greatest increase is due to our 3 grants that were awarded. And those are accounted for in our general revenue line as well. Are there any questions regarding this? Okay. Moving on to after school program. Our modified budget was 35,000. The department is requesting 65,000. Of course, this depends on what the next school year brings. It could be adjusted at mid-year. Again, the KIND program, the modified budget was 16,842. The department is requesting 32,088. Both the after school program and the KIND program generate revenue and balance out to 0. And then we're down to the pool. This is, the modified budget was 125,000. The department's requesting 74,000 this year. This is due to, we cannot open the pool for public swim until phase 4. So we don't know when that will happen. So this is our best guess as to what we believe the pool will bring in.
And typically our pool is open until September, is that right, Dan? I don't know if Dan's on.
Yeah, he shook his head yes.
Okay. And so is this assuming that it wouldn't open this year, but then it would open in April of next year? Okay.
Okay. There's no further questions. I'll move on to the summer program. Again, this is our best guess. I believe we're working on getting summer programs open. So modified budget last year was 24,000. This year it's 31,000. Does anyone have?
Offset by a like amount of revenue.
Yes.
And they're planning summer programs with all the physical distancing and everything that's required.
Okay, so the modified budget last year was 8.3 million, and the department is requesting 7.9 million this year. Again, that's $1 million in expenses for grants. So actually we're looking at 6.8 million.
We'll point out that the adopted budget was 8.93 million this current year.
So do we have a new number then on projected revenues and what we're going to have to draw from our reserve?
Yeah, yes. Well, we're projected to expend a total of 1 million in reserves this year. And the original approved budget for 1920 was to expend 625,000 of reserves. The remaining balance we have to expend is due to the revenue loss of COVID-19. The estimated reserve balance, if we adopt this budget, is currently 809,000 at the end of fiscal year 2021.
So that's the amount we have to draw this year is 809. What would that leave us as a balance in our reserve?
809,280 would be the balance at the end of fiscal year 2021. Again, that's the estimate. The final draft for the audit for fiscal year 18-19 is expected to be signed by June 30th.
So Chris, we're projecting to expend 814,000 from reserves. So if our revenue projections hold true, that would cut our reserve in half. You think the reserve may be a little higher than that, but without the final numbers on the audit that are coming in June, we're using this conservative number.
And so let's see, with that number, we would say that our reserve is what percentage of our general budget?
Right now, it's in the neighborhood of percent without me doing an actual calculation.
Maybe like 14, 15% at the end of 2021.
I did a quick calculation and I have almost 11% of our budget for fiscal year 2021 would be the reserves.
All right. Okay. Oh, I took out the million for the grants. And
Oh,
I was
I'm
looking
sorry.
at I was looking at the 6.9, and that gave
Yes,
me the 15.
And we want 20% as like a benchmark.
Well, I don't think we want to spend any of our reserves, but we
No, but like a healthy estimate would be your reserve should be about 20% of your general budget. I mean, I know we're going to be below what we would want, but didn't we discuss that rule of thumb at a recent meeting?
We discussed it. We didn't actually make a final decision. But yeah, I think the numbers we were throwing about were 15 to 20%, if I recall correctly. And if we were to try to maintain 20%, then we would need to cut about 500,000 to 600,000 from this budget.
And I'm not suggesting that. So we have a number for when things do turn around, how to build up our reserve with our future budgeting.
I agree with you, Karen, that our goal would be to to be at least 20%. But the reserve is for a time like this when our revenue is down and we need to use parts of it to keep the minimal staffing levels and minimal services.
Right. I mean, I'm looking through here and it doesn't really, I can't identify anything to cut unless you're starting to cut actual staff. And I don't think if we have, I think we should only be looking at cutting staff when our reserve gets to that point, right? What do you guys think?
Yeah, we run a slim crew right now.
One thing I'd like to point out is that we currently pay some portion of health insurance for 57 retirees, and we have 38 staff. So our staff is considerably lower than the number of retirees that we have. I think it's very minimal.
And I think you budgeted the revenue projections as extremely conservative. I mean, I agree with what you did, but just based on my anecdotal evidence of working at my store and seeing people calling and planning on coming to the Eastern Sierra, hopefully we'll see an increase in visitation without an increase of COVID. That's the goal.
We're hoping. You're absolutely correct.
Yes.
And as Jenny mentioned early on, we're going to be re-examining this every quarter at least to see where we stand and if adjustments can be made. But again, we feel that the amount we're using for reserves needs to be paid back before we add other expenses.
Am I right to say that the governor suspended stores and everything having to pay the sales tax right now, but it doesn't mean they're exempt from it. Whatever they've been collecting, they'll have to pay later. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we may just get a late paycheck from that down the line.
Next April, I think, is the date.
And may I also add that our unfunded liability, we used to pay that all at once up front in the beginning of the fiscal year. We have decided to make monthly payments on that. So our revenue, isn't so depleted in the beginning of the year.
And so, Jenny, do you have a sense for how TOT has been trending in this past quarter?
Yes. So we need 138,000 to meet our modified budget projection. And when I did an average for 5 years, it's 670,000. And 25% of that would be 167,000. So I believe we'll definitely meet our TOT and maybe go over for the fourth quarter. And then also, I believe our sales tax, we have 272,000 to meet, and I believe we'll definitely meet that.
That's good.
And then our property taxes look low, but we did receive a May payment that just hasn't been recorded yet in Cassell. So we have met our property tax. So our revenue will be met this fiscal year, what we
in the modified budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay. So I see what is it? For our TOT revenue projections for next year, we're talking about essentially getting 55%, 60% of a normal year.
60% is what we landed on.
I was just wondering if Q4 of this year is anywhere near that, because I would hope that Q4 of this year would be the worst quarter.
Yes. And third quarter, we received a few TOT payments late. There's one one hotel that hasn't paid it yet.
And was it just today or yesterday that short-term rentals were approved? So that includes hotels, isn't that correct?
No,
No,
it was just campgrounds.
No campgrounds and Airbnbs and those kind of things.
Nope, no Airbnb, no hotels.
Campgrounds and RV parks, but Airbnbs, just think of anything where they're staying in their own facility, a tent, an RV, you know, whatever. But if you're staying in a room where other people can come and stay, you know, before you, after you, those are all still closed.
it sounded like listening to the governor today at noon that the state is moving towards stage 3. So I'm hoping that we get to stage 3 soon, and that's when hotels can open.
Right. I think, what is it? Salons can start opening June 4th or something like that, according to
Working on the
attestation.
that right now.
Probably going to be a long line for haircuts.
I'm gonna get a mullet.
I have clippers, guys.
It was just a little hard to operate them on myself.
Oh, for a fee.
Will you wear a mask?
I feel healthy.
Are there any other questions regarding the general fund expenses? Should I move on to the sewer fund?
Yes.
All right. Okay, sewer fund, our modified budget had revenues in 1920 at 1.2 million. The department is requesting this year at 1.1 million. Our expenses, the modified year was 1.4 million, and this year it's 1 million. Does anybody have any questions regarding this? The biggest decrease would be capital equipment replacement.
That's actually, it's not in our general budget, right? That all comes from sewer funds that are earmarked for that?
Yes, correct. All right, if there's no further questions, I'll move on to the gas tax. The modified budget for this fiscal year was 173,000. This year, the department is requesting 140,000 in revenue. Expenses, modified budget had 160,000, and the department is requesting this fiscal year 80,000. Does anyone have any questions regarding the gas tax?
And this is effectively the difference between last year, is that this was all collapsed into a single line item, and now it's actually being broken out and made clear.
Yes. In prior years, it was used under salaries. This year, it was all under professional technical services. And this fiscal year, we're moving it back into salaries. Again,
Okay.
this is only, this doesn't include SB1 RMRA funding. This is our regular gas tax money.
And the balance for this year, which seems to be about $60,000, what is that going towards? Is that one of these stipulations that 60,000 actually has to go to work as opposed to salary?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, Jeannie, can I step in there?
Yes, certainly.
So I've done a lot of homework on these two gas taxes and particular items, and the RMRA funds need to go to actual projects on the ground, work that's developed. The HUDA funds, the Highway Users Tax Account, can be used in salaries solely for street maintenance. It doesn't have to be accounted for to a particular project. And over the years, we always did that with the HUDA, but last year, for whatever reason, it was decided to be put all into projects. So we're going to just go back to what we used to do. And with the trying to save, cut general fund revenue in streets, we decided to use this money in salaries again, and we'll have a remainder from this current fiscal year that we'll be able to buy materials and stuff with to do the work we do next year.
Okay.
If there's no further questions, I'll move on to the water fund. The modified budget for this fiscal year was $1 million. The department is requesting revenue at 9, or projecting our revenue would be 900,000. The expenses are, the modified budget was 1 million. This year it's 1.3 million. The biggest increase is capital improvement.
This is the North Sierra water line project, which we deferred from last year. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be correct. And then we will continue to defer. If things get better, then we'll build it. If not, we can go ahead and leave it for the next year. It's not something we have to do. It's a better thing. It'll be good for the community, but if we need the reserves, we need them.
Well, but the water fund seemed like, if I recall from last year, it seemed to be in a pretty good fund balance.
Yes, it is. Water and sewer are, and especially with deferring those projects. But we also have, in sewer, especially the JPA, we may have land purchases. So reserves I feel, will not be a bad thing to have.
Agree. Yeah. And Dustin, just out of curiosity, have you noticed construction costs going down at all?
Not yet. Actually, construction is staying busy right now. I'm surprised, but no, has not dropped off yet.
And I mean, so if we don't, well, I guess we don't really know, but if we don't actually do that capital improvement project this year, the cost might even be higher in the future, right?
You're exactly right, Stephen. That's the risk we take. It's also, it usually takes about a year for construction to see the slowdown, because most of these projects are in the process and already funded. It's what comes along next year is where we'll see if it's going to get better or worse for the construction industry.
Okay, well, then we'll keep an eye on that every quarter or so.
Yes.
All right, we're moving on to Sunrise. Modified revenue last fiscal year was 130,000. This year, our projected revenue is 94,000. Expenses for the modified budget was 200,000. This year it's 117,000. The biggest decrease was capital improvement. And we're removing the cost sharing plan.
What is the cost sharing plan?
It's where the department, the water and sewer and Sunrise was included, help pay for the administrative cost. It's the city cost plan, I'm sorry. Are there any further questions? Okay, we're moving on to COPS. The modified budget in revenue was 100,000. This year, we're anticipating 100,000. We will meet our revenue. We again received a payment in May that hasn't been recorded yet. The expenses for the modified budget for COPS was 211,000. This year, we're estimating at 100,000. Is there any questions, or does Ted have anything to add?
I don't. Thank you for asking that.
And so this is the fund that we're actually using to replace vehicles, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, oh, go ahead, Jenny.
No, go ahead, sorry.
We did, in this current fiscal year, we shifted the purchase of all police vehicles to COPS, which is really a good spot to use the money. It is a grant. We get it every year. We want to make sure and stay well within the guidelines. So yes.
Okay. If there's no more questions, we'll move on to the Spruce Hamby sidewalk. This is a reimbursement for expenses. So the revenue that we receive will be based upon the expenses for that year. So we just moved forward the revenue for that we anticipated last year to this fiscal year, and we moved the expenses over as well. Are there any questions? And then the final budget line item we have is the East Line Street Bridge. Again, this is cost reimbursement, so the revenue we'll receive will be based upon the expenses for the fiscal year. And that's it.
Okay.
Nice work. That was not an easy budget.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Anything you want to add, Ron?
Again, I want to thank Jenny for her diligent, hard work over the past few weeks. But I also want to express my appreciation to all the department heads for cooperating and presenting budgets that we had to make very little change to. Everyone knows this is a difficult year, and everyone was very cooperative and helpful in getting to this. So thanks to all of the department heads for that.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank Jenny as well too. Rich and I, what a huge project that she came into to try to put together, and just the timing of it as well too. We appreciate all of her hard work. Very easy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, it's just really a good job that you know, we made a lot of cuts and but we didn't have to cut anybody, and I think it's great the way the whole city is pitching in to make this work. Just to recap, we're going to be short. Was like a little over 800,000 that'll come out of the reserves, and I'd like to see if our revenues are higher than expected, that we just go ahead and put whatever is above that budget back into the reserves, just so it's there for the next time we need it.
And Ron, do we still have, yeah, I agree. Do we still have the possibility of monies coming for smaller cities?
Yeah, we'll talk about that under the COVID item at the end of the meeting, but there are some possibilities. First of all, I think Jenny mentioned that we may get some COVID expense reimbursement from FEMA. We don't know how much that will be or if it indeed will come, but we're thinking positively at this point. There still is no federal appropriation for cities under 500,000, but we learned last week that the governor's budget, as of the May revise, as they call it, that he's presenting to the legislature, includes 450 million for cities under 500,000. So depending on what happens with the legislature, if they adopt that, there may be some funds that come to the city from that. There's a lot of cities to divide up 450 million with, so
Right.
I'm telling what our share would be at this point.
Right. It all would be a help.
Yes, it would.
Yeah. Thank you, Jenny, so much. You did great.
Thank you.
Okay.
And there are no public comments, just so you know, Mayor.
Pardon me?
There are no further
Oh.
public comments this year, just so you know.
Okay, perfect. Does everybody want to move into the rest of the meeting? Do we need to take a 5-minute break and then resume the meeting?
I think a break would be good.
Okay, so I'm not sure what your watches say. Mine says 5:35, so we'll resume back in 5 minutes. That would be 5:40 according to my time.
Sounds good. Don't anybody sign up.
No, don't do anything IT wise. All right, great job, Ron and Jenny and department heads. We'll be right back.
Robin, if you can mute everybody, that would be nice at this point if they haven't muted themselves already.
Everyone is muted.
Everybody back?
There's a few of us still here.
I am. I got disconnected for a moment, but I got back on pretty easily.
Good job, Ted.
We'll see.
Yeah. Robin, are you back? No, Robin. Ron?
I'm here. We can't hear you, Robin. Still can't hear you.
Shouldn't have done a break.
Robin, whatever line you're calling in on is muted, so unmute the actual number, please.
I think I'm back on now.
You're back on.
Okay.
Okay. We have everybody with us. We're going to proceed on to item number 7 of the agenda, which is our department head reports. And we'll start with Fire Chief Joe Dell. We have Joe with us. Joe, are you there? I can't hear you, Ron.
Perhaps we could take him out of order, Madam Mayor, and somebody could text him and put him in the queue.
Okay, I also couldn't hear Ron when he was just talking right now. I don't know if he's muted or not. Ted, are you ready to go?
I can do it.
Okay, Police Chief Ted Steck, please.
Okay, good evening again. We have had a fairly steady flow of calls for service over the past couple of weeks. For instance, a couple of non-injury hit and run traffic accidents, quite a few disturbance calls, a traffic stop for open container of alcohol that led to a felony warrant arrest on the driver, and citations for the passengers. We also had an alarm call, a burglary alarm call at a local fast food restaurant in the middle of the night, where the officers located a man hiding in one of the restrooms. The suspect refused to comply. He would not exit. So the sheriff's office canine was deployed. The suspect continued to resist for a period of time. He then claimed he was the manager and was just working, but that was not the case. At any rate, successful arrest, and after a medical clearance, he was booked into the county jail. Fairly local man, 41 years old. Next, high school graduation is this week. It will be a 3-day format to accommodate social distancing. I'm sure glad they were able to pull it off. The first day is underway right now. We have our reserve officers and police officers out there, just providing support and security. Thanks to Public Works, they helped us again with all the barricades so we could close off the necessary streets. So we're in good shape. We're hanging in there, and congratulations to all the high school graduates. That is my report, unless you have any questions.
Anybody have anything for Chief Stack? Nope. Okay, we join you in congratulating all of our grads too, and it's a tough graduation for them this year. But
definitely one for the memory books.
Yeah. They get the paper though, so that's what counts, right?
Yeah, I think it'll be all right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Do we have Joe Dell with us now? Fire Chief?
Yeah, thanks for stepping up, Chief, to step out there for a second to take care of some kid issues. Apparently I'm babysitting and I didn't know it. We want to keep them from killing themselves. The fire department continues to move on. You know, our call volume hasn't really slacked from the COVID. We continue to have fires. We had a structure fire out in Rovana last week, or 40 acres. Our big planning event is for the 4th of July fireworks. We're trying to figure out how to, one, make sure we have it funded, and two, maintain social distancing. At this point, we're looking at going back to the airport, trying to finalize a lot of details. There's a lot of security, a lot of fire hazard stuff that we're worried about. It looks like we probably won't do any tailgating or pools or personal fireworks. So open the gates last minute, park everyone, have the show, and then repark, which causes it in itself some problems because the people who are used to coming in and doing fireworks are probably going to want to stay out in the desert and do fireworks. And so there's a lot of coordination with the Sheriff's Department and CAL FIRE and the Forest Service and that to make sure that we have a large presence out there. Another thing exciting is the EMT students all passed their class and they're all signed up to do national registry and get going on that side of things. Other than that, still working in logistics. Orders are coming in every day. Orders are going out. We're starting to try and supply some of the nonprofits and some of the other things through state caches, and just working diligently to get through the COVID, and hopefully we see a vaccine soon. And as things start to open, we're all responsible and continue to keep the spread down in Inyo County.
Okay, thanks, Joe. I had a question on the Safe and Sane fireworks, the tailgating at the airport. Is that a restriction being given to us by the county, or?
No, we've had some real big safety issues. Last year we had injuries. And so, when we're going to provide an event, it has to be a safe event. And if we cannot control fireworks, then we're just going to ban them outright in our event.
Okay. Yeah, I was just weighing out the, possibility of them being taken out in the desert versus, allowing them in.
So that's a decision that I've been struggling with for quite some time now, ever since last year's event. Do we host an event that's possibly dangerous and can hurt people, or do we take our chances and let people light fires out? The illegal fireworks are going to happen anyways. The Safe and Sanes are going to happen anyways. It's really a tough decision that's been weighing heavy on my mind. And I think at this time I prefer to provide a safe event that we have no injuries at.
Okay, I understand. I had another question for you. Have you been involved at all in the discussions of campgrounds for the Forest Service? The reason why I ask is because of the potential continued threat of wildfires due to dispersed camping. And have you been a part of that with Tammy Randall Parker and the forest team at all, or no?
No, I haven't been involved in any of those conversations, but I am privy to them. The biggest concern is people who are out dispersed camping are going to have campfires and then, and then cause fires. And, and it's a legitimate concern. And so, I was actually at Brown's the other day, and with the move up of Mono County, the campgrounds are all struggling to get up and open. They have water testing and all sorts of preparation to do that they thought that they had another week for. And then so everybody's trying to get the campgrounds up and going. The campfires in a regular campfire, in a campground, in a protected campfire pit are the safest campfires there are out there. We're starting to see a lot of people coming. Campfire safety is a huge deal. Fire safety out there altogether is a huge deal. I'm not sure what our fire on Sunday was up on the fishing opener in Mono County, but I don't know what exactly the cause of it, but there's always that chance that was from an errant campfire. So hopefully we open up the campsites. They want to do that. They're doing it as quickly as they can. And then if we're going to open up, start getting the hotels open and that type of thing to make sure that we're safe. On that note, we have to be careful of spreading the COVID as well. So it's a fine balance to walk.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for?
Hey,
Yeah.
Chief, what's your vision or idea of how we're gonna enforce absolutely no fireworks other than the show at the airport?
You know, I have a meeting scheduled with Sheriff Hollowell, Cal Fire, and then we're inviting the CHP as well. I think it's a very hard thing to do. I don't actually think it's possible, but the much marketing and reaching out to people that we can do, we can decrease that amount by as much as possible, and then try and reach out to the most egregious people and see what we're going to do. It's a losing battle. I've seen, you know, the illegal fireworks should probably start right about now, and they'll go heavy until, you know, well past the 4th of July. It's just one of those things that we're trying to figure out. I don't have an answer for it.
Thanks, Chief.
Joe, I have 2 questions from your report that's getting filed later. One of the things that I noticed was that you had 0 EMS calls this past month. Is that just because people are staying home and not getting sick and injured?
So people, you know, without having data behind me, listening to the radio, is the EMS call volume during the height of COVID dropped significantly to less than 1 a day for Simons. And then also we were staying in reserve, not putting ourselves out there. So call volume has resumed. You know, some, you know, from my wife working in the hospital and some of the other non-data driven observations, is that people were waiting till after most of the COVID crisis was finished to seek medical care. And now it's picking right back up again to where it was pre-COVID levels.
Okay. And then I also noticed in your report that you said the airport the commercial flight service has been delayed.
Yeah. So from what I understand is it looks like it's going to be delayed until maybe next year. I haven't heard any official word on that. I have heard that they're not going to request us for primary aircraft response. So they're going to figure out an in-house solution.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else for Chief Dell? All righty. Thank you so much. We'll move on to our Public Works Director, Destin Deshawn, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council again. So we've been pretty busy in the last week reaching out to all the restaurant owners, trying to get ahead of the game and find out what their seating arrangements will be, since their bills are based off of seating. You know, we want to do everything we can do on our end to see them succeed when they do open back up. And it's been pleasant. The majority of them are going to be, you know, definitely less seats, but not like 25% or anything like that. They're coming up with creative ways to make more room in the restaurant. So that's great news. Just seeing them open back up. And then obviously we've all been talking about how to navigate letting them use public property to go outside with. So kind of exciting news. Exciting to actually go in a restaurant and eat dinner again.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be fun, won't it?
Yeah, exactly. And so the high school, also adding on to what Chief Steck said, they're having their somewhat traditional graduation the next 3 nights. They also have requested to have Spruce Street closed probably sometime later next week, maybe on the 5th, when they should have been graduating, and the kids will all be able to line up on the sidewalks, and then people will be able to drive by, drop off cards and such like that, but we'll control to only that kind of traffic. I think it's kind of a neat idea, but I want to let you be aware of that. Probably everybody has noticed West J Street is done, open to traffic. Turned out great. Nice circulation for the town, and It was a great project. The Cebu to School path, we haven't talked about it a long time, but I wanted to let everybody know that it hasn't been out there. The tribe has installed a culvert over the ditch at the end and connected it into their paths out at the Pupfish Ponds and their network of trails out there. So it actually goes somewhere now.
Yeah.
And I guess last but not least, I've been meeting with Caltrans, trying to get a good handle on the Spruce Hanby Sidewalks project. The budget we have appears to be a little bit light in my eyes, and some other estimates that were given to me. So wanted to make sure that they'll allow us to build. The idea of the project would be Hanby through Spruce over to Yaney, and not and complete that and still be able to deliver a project that Caltrans, the state, will accept. Seems like right now they said yes, they're favorable to the idea. So I was happy because I didn't want to give back $940,000. But unless you have any questions of me, that's all I have.
I want to take the opportunity, Destin, to let people know I see that Elaine's not on the agenda to give a report tonight. And I just got an email from her because we've been talking about the newest Kmart parking lot, the big Kmart parking lot. And people have noticed how much it's overgrown in the weeds and whatnot. And so I was so glad to see that she forwarded us an email that it looks like they actually have somebody contracted to come and start cleaning that up within the week, right?
That's exactly what we're hearing right now, and are hoping. I know they've already hired Vaughn's hired a landscaper to start getting the irrigation going again and take care of the planned landscape, and then somebody else to get rid of the weeds. So it's taken a while, but we're getting there.
Yeah. People ask about it, and it's not because we haven't been trying.
Yes.
It's complicated, but yeah, really good news to see that. So yeah, thank you. Anybody else have anything else for Destin? All righty, thank you so much. We'll move on to Community Services Manager Dan McElroy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, first off, I would like to thank all of our staff for our Parks and Recreation Department and Community Services for working through the COVID-19 and all the stressful situations, the phone calls that come in, the, Waylon, Carrie, Sam, Brittany, especially with working for Joe and doing a lot of the work behind the scenes to make everything happen. Especially Carrie as well, helping with budgets and of course the day-to-day phone calls of people wanting to know what's going on and what's opening, and just families and parents and people that want to be involved and want to see us do what we do. And at this time, it's kind of hard to kind of step back and, not do what we normally do. With that being said, is, having to modify schedules and modify payments and modify everything that we do to meet the need of what's going on. So I can't thank them enough. And if you guys see them, definitely thank them. It would definitely lift their spirits. So with that being said, we had a Zoom meeting with Leslie Chapman and Megan from the county last week to discuss the possible reopening of programs and the city park pool, as well as some sports activities. With that being said, as far as timeline, we're looking at possibly reopening some of our programs, our summer camps, especially with heavily modified scheduling, and of course, how the programs will run with social distancing and everything like that. Brittany is working diligently to produce what it looks like here in the next week, so that we can get that to the county so that we can move forward and start hosting summer camps. With that is also the city park pool, because at this time, the city park pool will be in phase 3 of the reopening process. We're looking at possibly not having it open for public swim, as that allows people to congregate in large groups and everything else. So we're pushing to have a swim team, lap swim, and of course, aquatics class things that we can control and things that we can manage to make sure that we're meeting all the guidelines that the county and state are putting forward to us. With that being said, we continue to host showers for Amaka. Probably 3 to 4 a week, sometimes 5, but the use has been minimal. But our staff has been more than accommodating and welcoming to all those people, and I can't thank them enough for doing that. A big thanks to Waylon and Sam and Scott, one of our part-time employees, for installing all the flower baskets on Main Street. They look fantastic, as well as Warren Street. With Warren Street in the next week to 2 weeks, as soon as we have them ordered, but as soon as they show up, we will have banners that will go on Warren Street with the names of high school graduates. That was put forth by the PTO of the high school, as well as donations from area residents, just to make that happen so that we could purchase the banners, and that'll be awesome to install as well. Lastly, just in the parks, we continue to work on all the details, even though we haven't had major events going on. Everything needs to be maintained, from bushes to cart path edges to ball fields to everything. So we did a large cleanup at the community garden last week, and got the Pine to Park path cleaned up, and weed eated and just cleaned, and it looks fantastic as you walk through the back of the park. We're looking forward to carrying that to the front of the park and getting everything just kind of prim and proper now that the winds have stopped. Yeah. So with no wind, it allows us to keep everything clean and wonderful. So that's really all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
The flowers downtown are amazingly incredible. The colors with the roses, that sunrise color of the roses, and the colors in the basket, oh my gosh, they're incredible.
Agreed.
I just can't wait till we have more people to see them.
Right, and that is coming shortly. So
yeah,
we're as prepared as we can for everything up. Our city park is always the hub of the community, so being prepared for that large influx of people. But that's kind of what we do, and we're looking forward to getting back to there. So
yeah. Okay, anything else for Dan? Anybody?
Good job, Dan. And something you said, I have a question for Joe Dell if he's still on. Joe, were you able to hire someone from the district monies? They said you could put somebody on? Not sure.
Yeah, I did. I was going to save that introduction for the next meeting, but we hired we hired Christina Bloom, Justice. So
okay. All right, sweet. Thank you.
Very cool. Okay, anything else for Dan? No, okay, we'll move on then finally to our city administrator, Mr. Ron Phillips, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm going to save most of my report for the COVID item at the end of the agenda, but just wanted to mention that, to tag on to what Chief Dell said and what Dan said, the parking lot at the old Kmart has been used by Amaka for safe parking and sheltering. There's not been a lot of use of that, maybe 4 to 5 vehicles a night, but it was something that was required in order for us to be able to provide our attestation to the state to get approved to move from phase 1 to phase 2 in stage 2. So it's providing some help, and as Dan said, some of those people are using the showers at the pool. So I think we've done what we can to meet the state's requirement, and it's being helpful to a few people. That's all I have for now. I'll talk more later.
Okay, we hope so. Anybody have anything for Ron right now? Okay, we'll move on then, and we have item 8 is our Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau update. Have all the council members and possibly staff been able to look over the report that Tawny submitted to us this week? Anybody have any questions or comments on the the Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau report? Do we have Tawny with us right now?
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Tawny, was there anything that you wanted to add to your report? I believe everybody's had a chance to read it.
No, just all in all, it's we're hanging in there and hopefully getting ready to reopen some things, and yeah, just hanging in there. Excited about the grant program. We'll be making those award announcements this week. And just a reminder, since I have the public maybe here watching for a minute, we do have the disposable masks available for businesses that need those, like a small pack of 20 or 30 if they need those to tide them over. So, but if you don't have any questions, then we'll just go with the written report.
Okay, great. Yeah, and thank you for the report. Anybody have anything else for Tawny before we let her go?
If I could.
All right. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Quickly. Leslie Chapman and Megan McCammon with the county have held 2 business webinars over the last 2 weeks for 2 hours on a Wednesday afternoon. I've had over 100 participants on those webinars, and Tawny's been an important part of that as well. And I think it's been very helpful in getting information out to businesses and helping them prepare to get reopened. So we appreciate that very much.
And thank you, Ron. And we do have the 3rd one tomorrow, again at 3 o'clock. So hopefully people will tune in, and we're going to focus on the businesses that are getting ready to reopen, again, like the salons and such, lodging. So.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Tawny.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our consent calendar, and matters in the consent calendar are considered routine. So we act on them with one motion. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding the calendar? Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
I have one comment. I was wondering if 9.A.8, which is the letter to Devin Mathis relating to Opportunity Zone federal tax advantages, if we could also have the county send that. So Ron, if you can nudge the county to maybe send something similar, that would be great.
We will send them copies of ours, and
Okay. Is that good, Stephen?
Yeah, I think it's great.
Okay, anybody have anything else?
No public comment.
No public comment? Okay, thank you, Robin.
Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion that we accept the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. And the vote, please, Robin?
Councilmember Mahovey,
Yes.
Councilmember Ellis, Councilmember Ellis.
I know he notified me a while back, just a little while ago.
He said yes.
Councilmember Ellis,
Yes.
Councilmember Schwartz,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Costello,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on to new business now, item number 10. And the first one is proposed resolutions for 2020. Oh, sorry, it's not 2020. Well, it is, but proposed resolutions 2020-12 and 2020-13, fixing the employer contribution under the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act. I believe this will go to Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a part of our deliberations on the budget and finding places to reduce expenses, we determined that to increase the employee share of health benefits would be very helpful in meeting our budget goals. So we are proposing through these resolutions to increase the employees, the city councils and the retirees share of those costs from 10% of the premium to 15% of the premium. By doing that, we save in the neighborhood of $56,000 for next year. This is something that will be re-examined throughout the year, seeing what happens with our revenues, but part of the budget numbers that you reviewed with Jenny, this is proposed to be made.
Okay, thank you. Any council members have any comments or questions on this item?
Yeah, Ron, I wanted to ask you, I know you just really talked with mostly department heads, but how is the rest of the staff feeling about that? Is everybody good or make too many waves?
The Employees Association submitted in writing a proposal that instead of reducing or instead of increasing our share of the health premium by this number from 10% to 15%, that they take a day of furlough a month. That day of furlough would actually cost them more than increasing this share of the health insurance premium. So I am not recommending the furlough day, but instead I'm recommending the increase in the share of the health premium.
I think that's good. If for nothing else, for continuity, that the week isn't cut short, and then there's that much more to do on Monday. And so cut the budget and still made it so that, like you said, they're actually going to make it better with this proposal than they would with a day of furlough.
Yes.
Okay, anything else on this item?
I just would like to mention that, it's never fun to lose a benefit. And I really appreciate the employees of the city of Bishop stepping up and knowing that this is hopefully a short-term problem, and they're doing everything they can to make the city be the best place it can be for our constituents. And hopefully this will end soon, so we don't have to keep this going for much longer.
So, Mr. Phillips, that is a question that I had for you, and I know I've already talked to you about it, but for the sake of others, the possibility of putting it back to the 10% when things turn around financially is there, right?
That is a possibility, but I would prefer not to make that as a for sure thing as at this point. I should mention also that I've heard from, I have one former employee come and meet with me, said that he had heard from others, other retirees, that they were objecting to this increase. I had a call from the widow of a retiree objecting as well. And I believe that Chief Steck had a call from a former police officer that was concerned about it.
Yeah. Understandably so.
And I mean, just to be clear, this also applies to the council members who receive benefits as well, right? So not to me and you, Jim.
Right.
Yeah, that's a dangerous position for me to be in, but it does include council members.
Right.
That's good. It should.
Okay, anything else? Any public comment, Robin?
No, none received.
And are we looking for a motion at this? Yes.
Your motion.
Yes.
All right, I will recommend that the council to approve resolution number 2020-12, fixing the employer contribution under the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act at an equal amount for employees and annuitants for Bishop Management, Mid-Management, Miscellaneous, and Police Officers Association by title only, with the desired effective date of July 1st, 2020. And I will also move that we approve resolution 2020.13 by title only.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. And the vote, please?
Resolution number 2020-12, fixing the employer contribution under the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act at an equal amount for employees and annuitants. Councilmember Mohobi,
Yes.
Councilmember Ellis,
Yes.
Councilmember Schwartz,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Costello,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0. I will now read resolution number 2020-13. Resolution number 2020-13, fixing the employer contribution under the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act at an equal amount for employees and annuitants. Councilmember Mohobi,
Yes.
Councilmember Ellis,
Yes.
Councilmember Schwartz,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Costello,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to B, and that is discussion. The rest of our items for the evening are all discussion. And this discussion is to provide direction regarding a potential tax measure for the November 3rd, 2020 ballot. Mr. Phillips?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. At the last council meeting, we heard a presentation from Mark Mendel concerning options for possible increases in revenue. One of those options was a transactions and use tax, which the city does not have in place at this point. We do share in 30% of the county's TUT, as it's referred to, but the city does not have one of these in place on its own. We have the ability legally to have a transactions and use tax of up to 1%. The state limit is 1.5%, but since the county has a 0.5%, I believe our limit would be 1%, so that in the county we would not be going over that 1.5% number. A 0.5%, 0.5% would bring in, if the economy is in good shape, we're doing what we've done in the past, the neighborhood of 430,000 a year. So if this passed in in November. If it was on the ballot and passed in November, for this fiscal year, we'd get about half that amount, somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000 for the rest of the fiscal year. Then the next fiscal year, we get the total amount. A 1% increase in the TOT, the hotel lodging tax, would only be increased a little over $200,000 a year. So we're at 12% on that, and that TOT. Mammoth is at 13%, and that's one of the higher numbers in our region. So if we went to equal Mammoth, that would only be a $200,000 increase. So I'm recommending that council consider placing on the ballot in November a transactions use tax of 0.5%, effective January 1.
Okay, anybody have any comments?
So then our sales tax would rise from 7.75 to 8.25. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And then the TOT wouldn't be anybody local. It'd be just people that's staying here, unless the locals use the hotel.
That's correct. And in my memo to the council, I point out that I think that probably it would be easier to pass a TOT for that very reason. But I think fiscally,
Ron, can you speak closer to the mic?
for 0.5% as opposed to 1% for a.
So let me suggest this, that I'm watching how the interference is going. If anybody has microphones unmuted, if you could mute those, because every time there's background noise, it's cutting into Ron's presentation. And we didn't hear literally the last minute and a half of what you said, Ron.
Okay, I was mentioning that in my memo to the council, I mentioned that probably the TOT, the lodging tax, would be easier to get passed in an election because it does apply to the tourists and visitors, not to locals. But a 1% increase would only raise half the money that a 0.5% increase would raise on the transactional and use tax, transactions and use tax. So that's why I'm recommending that the council consider placing on the ballot a 0.5%, 0.5% increase for transactions and use tax. Was I able to be heard that time?
Yeah, I heard you. So, we've looked at this possibility for quite a few years, and we were looking at it fairly seriously for the year or two prior to the VTID tax going into place. And we were actually just about ready to go to have it put on the ballot. And then at the time we decided, okay, so the VTID is, we're going to throw our support in for that. And we didn't want to initiate both of them at the same time. And so we bowed out for that and did not, we just elected to not go forward with anything like that. And I mean, to me, there hasn't been a more pertinent time to ask the people, to pitch in for help.
So one of the things that concerns me is, now we're looking at 2 consecutive years with budget shortfalls of the order of 800,000. And we are at a point where we're like doing the bare minimum and still having to dip in 800,000 into our reserves. So I would imagine that if we're gonna do a tax increase, if we're gonna put that to the voters, that we shouldn't do something that's piecemeal where, oh, we asked for 0.5% here, but that didn't really do the whole thing. And then in a year we have to ask again. And so I don't know, what are some thoughts that other council members have on that aspect of it?
Well, my thought on that, Stephen, is that this is unusual in the fact that we're not having a downturn in our economy like we experienced a number of years ago, where we had to plan like that for the future. This is very, very circumstantial. And, you know, as long as we don't continue to react the way we have, you know, with shutting down our businesses and economy due to whatever might come along, then things should go back to how the economy was. People are almost seeing that it could go the other way, because there's very well possibly a lot less travel, you know, internationally, and much more, you know, domestic travel. And so you could only hope. But yeah, we're not looking at hopefully continued years of an economic downturn, recession type, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know, I understand that. And I mean, I guess the other thought that I had with this is I feel like we should also be exploring other means to get more revenue. And one of the obvious, like one of the things that I know the county has done is actually they ended up allowing marijuana related businesses and taxing that heavily. And we could also consider that to diversify the city's income, so we're not at the whim of just a sales downturn.
You know, I used to be against increasing sales tax because the sales tax laws across our state jurisdictions are so disparate and unfair. You know, you can buy something from somewhere in Nevada and not pay sales tax if you buy it online. But then as I've been in the retail trade for so long, it is a expected expense when people are buying merchandise. They're not going to not buy something if the sales tax is 7.75%, 8%. Not, I mean, you can go to county Santa Monica, not that I'm advocating for a 13% sales tax, but you can go to other counties and cities in the state that are 2 and 3 and 4% higher than what we're paying. And it's not, people, just from my anecdotal evidence, they don't flinch if they're going to buy a item that a little bit of sales tax is not going to stop them from buying it in Bishop versus somewhere else. So I truly think that this would be a very easy way for us to generate more revenue, as well as I think people, our constituents, you know, really do enjoy the services that the city provides and enjoy our beautiful parks. They enjoy our nice streets. They enjoy our beautiful flowers. And I can't imagine that they would not want to pay an extra, you know, 0.5% to continue to see that. And then the money, if we did get back to a place that we were pre-COVID, you know, we all had these grand visions of, you know, what could be for the city of Bishop. And that's what I'm hoping we will get to. You know, we're talking about trails around the city and all those big aspirational ideas that we've been having, we can move closer to that. So I am for it. And I even think we could do a 1% increase in TUT. Would we be allowed to, right? Because we have 1.5% that we're allowed to by the state.
Yeah, and then the county wouldn't be able to impose any more on the city.
So I mean, I wouldn't be against that.
That's because you don't have to run for a seat this year.
Oh, but it's not you. It's you know, it's the people. Yeah. We're not putting it on them. And that's what I like about it. They get to pick.
Yeah. Well, I agree with both what Karen said and Laura. You know, it's totally unknown whether, you know, things are going to go back to normal or stay low for a while or get worse. But I really do believe that with the precautions and everything, that our economy will bounce back, and this won't be a long-standing thing where we're not bringing any money in. And I think it obviously is going to be a little more palatable. I mean, if we put 1% on the ballot and it fails, then we have nothing. And so I would be more willing to go with the 0.5%. This is just a little easier for people to swallow. Have the ballot written well as far as the need and why we do it in the first place, and hope people step up to the plate. It's a 50% plus one that we need to get on the vote. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So that's actually, it's interesting you bring that up because I did do some research on this, and the League of California Cities actually even published information on this, that when you start doing fractions of a percentage, they're less likely to pass because it's harder for like the general public to visualize like, oh, okay, it's a penny on the dollar. And the moment you start going to fractions of a percent, I was fascinated when they told me that. And I was like, in the actual study that they've done. So just wanted to throw that little nerdy anecdote out there.
I like the idea of, you know, we're not looking at, not saying that would solve all of our problems, especially currently, but we're not looking at just one egg in the basket. You know, you mentioned diversifying and looking at other things. I particularly don't agree and like the marijuana idea, but that's, you know, that's for later. And but there's other things to look at. And I like the idea that we're not just, you know, relying on one big nest egg there.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that I really like is, as we just did our budget workshop, we went through to see what other, where we can slim out this budget. And unless we start talking about reducing city staff and services, I feel confident that we've done our due diligence in identifying all other aspects of to trim what we currently have.
Right. And I believe that I know for a fact that the citizens of the city of Bishop enjoy and greatly appreciate the services, the excellent services that they receive in the city.
Yeah, I kind of agree with everything that's been said so far. As far as, yeah, we've done a great job with budgets. We've slimmed down. I think we do an amazing job with running our city. In all the years I've been doing this, same as you, Laura, the efficiency of our city has improved. The services has improved amazingly. I mean, we do far more for far less than we ever have in the past. So I think we're doing great there. I think, you know, having traveled the state a little bit, it's not uncommon to go to LA and pay 10%, not even bad an eye, like Karen says. It's just part of life. So we have been fortunate that at 7.75, our citizens have a pretty nice little sales tax. So I think it's going to come down. I mean, timing wise, it's a little tough going through what we're going through. People are hurting a little bit everywhere. It's going to become a marketing thing that I don't know what the numbers percentage wise of what a of 0.5%, 0.75% would be this will capture the drive-throughs at McDonald's, the tourism dollars that seem to just kind of go through here. Yeah, I think it's a great thing. But as far as what we do at the city level, amazing job. I think $500,000, $750,000, whatever number we come up with, just enables us to keep that balance better and get us to a spot where we do have those higher reserves in the future because things are going to turn around quickly here in Bishop. I agree with you, Laura, that when the door opens up, people are going to want to travel locally. You already see it in Bishop now. It's going to get even bigger.
Yep, we hope so. Thank you, Jim. Anybody else?
So are you guys thinking 0.5% or 1%?
I think 1%. I mean, like I said, I don't like, I mean, I'm a nerd and I don't like dealing with fractions all the time. Just make it easy to comprehend. It's a penny on the dollar to help your town like live up to its potential. I mean, if we're going to go the route, I think it makes sense to do it. And then the other thing is that the residents will know for a fact that this is it. Like, if this passes, your TUT is not going to go up because even if the county tries to pass a measure or anything like that, because we're at the limit.
I'm going to stick with 0.5% because I think people can understand 0.5 penny. But
3/4.
I hear what
3/4. Yeah, I'm in favor of 0.5, but I'm not like, I'm not adamant against the 1%.
3/4 is the number though, because then it comes out at, to appease Stephen, it comes out at 8.5%, which is kind of cute.
I think we should go for 1.
Okay.
It's just all right.
Yeah, it's just discussion. So I don't know if we need to, provide some better direction at this point in time. What do you say, Mr. Phillips? Or Dean?
Ron, you're muted.
It would be good to have some direction so we could draw up a resolution or ordinance, whatever it takes to place it on the ballot. But if you want us to bring back 2 and you vote on both of them, we could do that.
Well, so here's the difficult part, and it's not a difficult part if that's the direction. So my I guess the immediate triage mechanism would be for Ron to poll the council at this point in terms of where they're at to see if we have a consensus. This is not a vote. This is not an action item. It does take a substantial amount of work to prepare the resolutions that you all need to approve for elections. And we are coming up on a very late cycle for Robin and for the city to get those to the county. And so our goal was, if the council's decision was to move forward with a tax measure, a TUT, then to prepare all of those documents that are required, along with the other election resolutions that are required, meaning council seats. And it's not a complicated, it's just an involved process. This is not just a standard resolution. So we actually need to have ballot measure language, a description of that. So it's not something that we can leave open at this point. So we would really need council direction. 1, yes, put a TUT on the ballot measure, and 2, here is the amount that we want to put on the ballot measure. If council cannot agree on the amount, then it does not go forward. So this would be the opportunity for council to give staff direction in terms of what to prepare to bring it back to them at that point.
So the way I see it is we have 2 that are pretty set with 1%, 2 that like the 0.5%, and Jim, you're out there with the 3/4. And if you had to go one direction, do you feel one way or the other? I hate to put it on you.
I mean, I'd be happy going with 3/4 as well.
Laura, I've been put in this spot before.
I know you have.
Yeah, it's always not the fun part. It's one of the worst parts about being mayor is when you have to be that boat.
Yeah.
I think probably 0.5% is going to be easier sale. I don't know if Dean or Ron would know this one. If we earmark it, would it be, because this is going to become a marketing campaign as much as anything. Can we earmark it to public safety, which is always an easier for people to buy? But we just take that 0.5% and
So
we take other funds and move them somewhere else.
The moment you earmark it, it needs a 2/3 vote.
So Councilmember Mahovey is correct that once it's characterized as a special tax and earmarked for a special purpose, it changes the voting threshold as opposed to a general tax going into general fund revenues. And if I were a tax expert, if Mark Mandel were on the line right now, he would tell you that obviously the thresholds for a special tax are far greater to get passed than a general tax.
So thank you. I like my 7.5% just because it's a round number. I'm sorry, council, I have a unforeseen event. I need to get off the phone. I truly do, but I will see you guys in a couple weeks.
But if you had to, you'd go half instead of 1. Okay. Thanks, Jim. Be safe.
So a couple of things that I think is extremely important if we're going down the sales tax measure is we really need to make it clear to everybody like what our budget goes to, and our general fund, excluding the one-off grants that we get for individual projects, is just shy of $7 million. Half of that goes to public safety, another to the PD, another fraction of that goes to the fire department. And so between just for in the general guise of public safety, where I'm putting PD and fire together, we're talking about 60% of our budget. And so I would imagine the voters would want to know that that's how our funds are typically distributed, and so how this would be contributing. The other thing that I wanted to say is our wording for the ballot. I think we should definitely put in a sunset clause that maybe says ended by the voters, so that they know that they also have the power to revote this at a later date if they want to. So I guess, I think it seems we're all in agreement that we've done our due diligence in trimming the budget and making sure that we have everything in order, that we're not doing superfluous expenses at the city. And if we want to increase the services that the city has and maintain the same level of public safety. Just as an example, how many PD positions are we not filling this next year? That ideally we would be filling 2, right? So I think we're in agreement that we would want to raise the TUT.
I'm for the TUT, and I actually appreciate Jim going down the middle. 2 of us at 0.5%, 2 at 1%, and as much as I'd rather, keep it low, I think I heard Laura say, I'm not totally against 1%, but maybe we can meet in the middle and go for 3/4, and that would make it 8.5 instead of 8.775.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was sad to look at the fire department budget and look at all those capital improvement projects that we've talked about in our fire meetings, and just kind of know we're gonna have to lean heavily on the either rural fire district or wait. And I think that we owe it to our community to let them know that this is an opportunity that they have to continue to step up and you know, pay for the things that they enjoy, like fire service and police service and beautiful parks and a great Parks and Rec program. And I think, I really do think that people know that, you know, there's a big shop local campaign going on nationwide because people understand the value of supporting your community. And there's no better time than now when that momentum is happening.
Okay, so it sounds like we're leaning towards 3/4 possibly right now, but we're discussing, we're keeping it at not designating what it would be used for at the 50% plus one vote.
Right, but when we talk to people, we should like make it clear to them that even though it's not designated, like this is ultimately what we spend our budget on. And yeah,
absolutely, I got it.
I think though there might be some real value in maybe just doing a little research in what Stephen had studied from the league, because that type of data makes a lot of sense. I mean, 0.75, you might look at it on a ballot and be like weirded out by it. I know it seems bizarre, but you look at these marketing studies and the way people make decisions on a split second when they're doing the vote don't make sense sometimes. And I don't think the rational conversation we're having now of between 0.75 and 1, you know, is a very rational, like, well, they're paying less, so they might go with less. But that number choice, they might be like 0.75, no. 1, yes, you know, because 0.75, that's 2 numbers, right? There's 2, and they think it's even, I'm not kidding. They might think it's just things, think about it just from like a more like marketing perspective. If the data shows that a whole number is more conducive to garnering more support, I would just say give pause to that because it does make sense.
So how strong is this data, Stephen?
it was pretty strong. Robin was actually at that meeting, at that talk with me. It was, yeah, I'll try and.
So is that recent, like in the climate where people see tax and they just go, no?
Yep, that was in the League of California Cities.
That's recent.
Presentation the last time, yeah.
Recent, okay. So Chris, how do you feel about 1%?
I'll let you guys overrule me.
Oh, gee. Okay. You know, if that kind of statistics are there, it's, you know, psychologically, if it works out with people, you know, we passed up doing anything the last time we talked about it, and it's been a lot of years that it's been raised. So like I said, I'm not adamant against it.
So here's perhaps a middle ground. If you will, the reason for bringing this to discussion today was to give kind of 2 bites at the apple for council. So we've had this discussion. If it sounds like there is consensus to number 1, put a TUT measure on the ballot. And if the majority here present today want to say that, you know, let's set it at 1% or set it at 5%. I'm not advocating one way or another. Then when it comes back to you on June 8th, as a formal resolution, if there is significant debate and discussion, then you could always give staff discussion to change that one number at that time. So that might be the middle ground that gives some processing time. And then, frankly, it does require a two-thirds vote of council, 4/5 vote of council at that time. So if you want to give direction to staff to reduce it by 5% or increase it by 1% or somewhere in between, we could change that number at that time if that helps everyone tonight.
Okay, sounds good. Everyone go with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next discussion. To discussing the flavored tobacco sales ban. Did all of you receive public comment on this?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody having, I mean, I think all of you know that because I kind of brought this forward, and I know Mr. Phillips has told me a couple of times now, and at staff meeting, he made the announcement that there's actually a bill at the state level right now that would ban flavored tobacco statewide. So I don't know if you would prefer to wait and see what the state does, or if we move on ahead of the state, or.
Well, are we just council discussion?
Yep, this is just a discussion.
I mean, I think whatever we do, it should be in line with the county. Because if like the ultimate issue that we're trying to address with this is teenage smoking and getting young kids hooked on tobacco and nicotine. From the presentations that we've had in the past, it seemed clear that the majority of teens who were getting vaping and vaping products were getting them online, which a ban that we did now would not ultimately address the underlying problem. And so if we were to just ban it in town and the county doesn't, we're not addressing the problem. And I know that the county has already been preparing something on this. We even had a public comment with regards to that they were going to be visiting it in sometime in July. And so, I mean, I think I'd be comfortable waiting to see if we can, what their draft of a resolution was, and then seeing if we can mimic what happens there.
Yeah, you're sort of letting them take the lead on it. Whereas, have you noticed how many times the city takes the lead and the county follows?
I was going to say the same thing, that, I don't mind if they're moving ahead with it, to line up with them, but I don't want to necessarily wait for them. And, for as many of them as do get it online, a lot of them, don't. And that's my thing with having marijuana sales too. It's easy to say, oh, well, it's illegal to sell to minors, but how many minors are getting alcohol, and how many minors are getting cigarettes and vaping products illegally? And so as you've seen the reports, it's the #1 preventable disease in our country. And I have no problem taking a stand to say, let's stop selling candy flavored, coffin nails to kids, and taking the lead, like Laura said, it looks like it's going to happen in the state anyway, and then that'll filter down to us. So that's my 2 cents.
So I guess one of my questions is, as you just pointed out, it's already illegal to sell to minors. So how is the enforcement of a ban different than that enforcement? Maybe Chief Steck can comment to that.
Well, I think what you guys are talking about is making it illegal for the minors to possess it. So if that's the case, we could confiscate it from a minor who has it. And there would be a citation involved with that, probably a city ordinance type of citation, and which would get them into the probation department. So we're able to not only enforce the sale of it, but also possession. Similar to what the penal code had a while back, the 308B that we were talking about.
But do you have to do a ban on sale to enforce the possession charges?
Well, I think just just a complete ban. You just can't possess it or sell it, I think is what you guys are talking about here. Just making it illegal, period. In that case, what we would use that section and enforce it.
I originally thought that this ordinance wouldn't be able to accomplish the goal that we're looking for as far as curbing, teenage tobacco use. But as we've been talking about it now for a long time and receiving comments from public health experts, it seems like they are very much in favor of a ban, given their experience, and that they truly do believe that something like this will help curb teenage smoking and help prevent lifelong, addiction and health issues. And really also, even if our enforcement isn't, 100%, because we might not have the capacity, and even if kids are still able to get it from the internet until maybe there's a statewide ban, potentially a teenager just knowing that it's illegal in the city of Bishop might take pause before they make that purchase. Maybe not, but even if it just helps one or two kids from lifelong health issues, I think it's worth it. And it doesn't really cost us much to say, to make a stand and saying, hey, we really believe in your health and well-being, and we, are going to make this law. And it might not be perfect. And that's kind of what was my issue originally, is how are we going to enforce this? And is this really going to work? But I think just even from a philosophical standpoint, by saying that we're against it and we're going to make a law against it, and that if it even stops one or two kids from doing it, I think it's worth it.
Oh, excuse me, Robin?
Madam Mayor, I'm back in now. So she added me. Thanks. I saw Keith is on, so he pinch hit for me. I was going to make an introduction for him, but I don't know. I got bounced somehow. But thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Just add to what Karen said. It's kind of like COVID. Masks and social distancing hasn't stopped COVID, dead in its tracks, but it sure has flattened that bell curve. And I agree. There's no perfect solution, but what we can do to, save kids. Probably every one of us know people who have not been able to kick, tobacco. My sister started smoking when she was 13 years old. And I still remember being aghast at my parents saying, well, we know that you're going to continue smoking, but so we're going to forbid you to smoke outside the house. And I couldn't believe that they didn't just say stop. And she died about 5 years ago from lung cancer. And so, if, like Karen said, if we can help one kid, I'm hoping it's going to be hundreds of kids, then I think it's a good stand for us to take.
Do we have data of adult usage of flavored tobacco in the area?
From what I've heard from other people and read a little bit, League of California Cities and some of the other cities and counties, it's not, the issue is not adult usage. And the flavors primarily, mask, you've heard the whole thing. It's definitely, it's marketed, targeted to the youth. And yeah, from what I've heard, it's not an issue with adults.
But there is a lot of data, and I don't have it in front of me, Stephen, that shows that many of our adults that are smoking or chewing now started with flavored tobacco when they were younger.
Sure. I guess I'm assuming Keith is on because he's an expert on how flavored tobacco ordinance has been going around the state.
Yes, that's one of the purposes of my being here today.
So one question I have is, how do these ordinances deal with, say, hookah bars?
If the products that are being sold in the hookah bar qualify as a flavored tobacco product, as that term is defined by the local ordinance, then it would be prohibited from being sold in that hookah bar.
Because I mean, those aren't frequented by minors. Those are adults. It's like a social setting. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to deal with is, yes, I mean, I don't want anybody to insinuate that I don't care about children's health. That like any one of those public comments that say like, oh, it's that basically is saying like, oh, if you don't do this, you're not concerned with community health and well-being of our youth, that's not the case at all. But the position that we're kind of in is balancing those needs and the individual rights of an adult, right?
So one of the things that I learned as I looked into these issues is that there's a variety and a spectrum of ordinances that many local jurisdictions are using. There are several that do a total ban where any type of sale of a flavored tobacco product is completely prohibited. There is a slightly less stringent variety of ordinance that prohibits just these types of products from being sold within a certain number of feet from a school or a park. There are ordinances that tailor it even further and prohibit the number of flavored tobacco items that can be sold within a package. And so it certainly is within the city's authority to regulate this product from being sold in a hookah bar or not, and tailoring the ordinance to the specific needs that the city of Bishop is trying to address.
Although I would add, Councilmember Mahovey, that we get into a little bit of dangerous ground if we start going down the route of we can't go down the route of we want this type of store to be able to sell this and that type of store, and I'm sure you're well aware of that anyway. So it's really in this context, and I agree absolutely with Keith that we have variations of regulation that we can impose that just really can't be, well, how many, other than maybe locationally in terms of those restrictions, but not, we're going to exempt a hookah bar because we don't think enough teenagers or kids go into hookah bars. That would be a dangerous situation for the city.
So Stephen, I know you're concerned that you're thinking about people that are of age and they're legally, and smokers, tobacco users or whatnot with these flavors. When did these flavors come along? How long have they been on the market?
I mean, it depends on which ones you're talking about, but some of them have been around for like 10,
no, I'm
15
not
years.
talking about, not menthol, not like mint
So
flavor.
wait, but we're accepting menthol?
Well, that's the question. I mean, menthol's been around for quite some time. I'm talking primarily what has been marketed to kids to get them, when sales started decreasing significantly, then they marketed to get more people addicted with the candy flavors or kid flavors or,
Sure.
soda
No,
pop flavors and what.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, where I'm thinking from a place like, as we all know, addiction is a horrible disease. And I'm thinking even those adults who are addicted to nicotine right now, some of them do prefer flavors that are easier on their throats. And so are we talking about, because we're not doing anything to address their addiction. We're only trying to curb whatever comes down the line. And so, I mean, you're removing an option that they have in the type of tobacco that they're going to consume. Right?
But the point of this whole thing is that when people are already addicted to nicotine, they're going to take part of, they're going to want nicotine in their body and they don't care. We're talking about getting people addicted. So I don't really care about what adults are doing and what flavor and what they're going to intake nicotine because they're extremely addicted. we're talking about the attractiveness of getting people addicted at a
But
young age.
But I hear what Stephen's saying, and I get that, you know, my neighbor, he smokes menthol cigarettes and he's 88, and now he's not going to be able to walk to the Shell station and pick up his menthols that he's been doing for the last however many years if we pass this. And there's definitely, you know, that's a consequence that if we do pass an ordinance, like that'll happen, is like he will, you know, no longer be able to do something that he's been doing for however long he's been living in Bishop. But I think that that coupled with us preventing kids from having access to it in our community, that is that's something that I'm willing to accept. Like my neighbor will no longer have access to it. And it's a bummer because I think he should. He's been doing it for however many years. And this is now a, you know, something that will negatively affect him. And he lived a long life. And now we're stopping him because of this new product on the market that is going to stop him from getting his menthol cigarettes. And I think that's, I don't know, Steve, is that kind of what you're speaking to?
Yeah, I mean, it's the hard thing, like where dealing with an addiction is horrible. And now in a way, what we're doing by doing a ban, when you're talking about the adult side of it, is you're vilifying those adults. If they end up, you're not addressing the root of the problem, which is their addiction, but you're trying to prevent addiction from younger kids. But for somebody who's already an adult, you're effectively vilifying them. You're making them a criminal. If your neighbor were to get a pack of menthol from Nevada and then come in here and start smoking it, they in principle could be cited. It could be confiscated, much as Chief Steck just told us.
So if I could clarify that the majority of the ordinances that we've looked at do not regulate possession. It's simply the retail sales of the product itself. So possession would not be part of an ordinance, and nor have they been of the ones that we've looked at.
Another thing, I had a question for you. So menthol's been around forever. You know, this issue is not about menthol. So I would imagine, aren't there places in their bans excluding menthol from the ban?
So it's all in how you define the term flavored tobacco. And I can tell you that most jurisdictions do not consider menthol a flavor for a flavored tobacco product ordinance.
Okay, there you go. For your neighbor, Karen.
Well, Karen, I know it's a long shot, but maybe if you can't get menthol cigarettes, he'll just quit altogether and live a whole bunch longer.
Maybe, right?
Yeah. So what is the consensus here? We're looking at the possibility of a ban on flavored tobacco, moving ahead of the county and moving ahead of what the state might do. And we're looking at maybe potentially giving staff direction to write this up. Is that where we are?
So Madam Mayor, that's kind of where we're at just from a procedural perspective at this point. The pace is completely obviously set by council. I think I probably was dark when you all, the discussion happened. I hope that it was that the county HHS director did submit a public comment. They are in the process of looking at this. And so, maybe at this point it is direction that to make sure that I don't know where HHS and the county are at in terms of what they're envisioning with their ordinance or their discussion. It might make sense to be on the same page if everybody thinks that they're, if that's possible. And so maybe it is direction to meet with the county and to talk about, coordinating those two efforts so that we don't have differing ordinances that don't make much sense between the only incorporated city in the county and the county. But that's just a thought process. We don't need a decision here tonight. It can be, go give us some more information, go meet with the county and bring it back to us on June 8th. Or it can be any iteration of what council feels that they want at this point.
Well, my thinking on it, like I stated earlier, similar to what I said, is I think that it would help the county to follow along, because I know it's something that they're looking at, and I know that their, Health and Human Services Director has weighed in on it. And anyway, I think it would actually help them to move along with their decision if it's something that we did.
I mean, I would definitely be on board of like having larger package sizes, of actually having, tobacco retail licenses. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would want to hear from residents in town of how many adults actually use any of these flavored tobaccos. And if there aren't that many, then it's not, then my concern is completely invalid.
Well, and maybe we could, have staff reach out to Mono County and see how it's been working, because they're about a year in with their ordinance, I think, and see if there's been public outcry from adults saying that they wish that they could purchase flavored tobacco locally.
Right. Not only Mono County, that's a good point. I mean, they're right up the road, but possibly from other, other areas also. Would that help you, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, like I want to make it clear, like I'm not on a matter of principle against this. I just don't have the information I think I need to assuage my concerns that that harm is, that there are going to be unintended consequences to a lot of our residents that we haven't like considered as part of this, that we've been so focused on children, like we need to help the kids, even though I'm not entirely sure that this would really, I mean, I think it would help one or two. I don't think it would like solve the problem. But I want to make sure that that's balanced against adults. So I'll reach out to a bunch of people in the community and find out how prevalent the use actually is and whether it is an issue.
And then I just want to be clear, if like right now, if there's a juvenile smoking a cigarette, there's nothing that the police in California can do to stop them. And that would be the same if they're smoking a flavored tobacco cigarette. Is that right? With this ordinance, it's only for selling, it's not possession.
Yes, the ordinance as contemplated would only be regulating the sales, and then the existing state laws on possession of tobacco products by minors would apply and could be enforced by the police department.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I was going to suggest something similar to what Dean said. We received this letter today from Anna Scott, and she says they're going to be bringing this to the County Board of Supervisors in July. It seems to me like it would be beneficial for us to collaborate with the county and share our thoughts together and maybe come up with something that both the county and the city can support. So my suggestion is that you give us direction to meet with the county and see where they are and bring back that information on June 8th or the second meeting in June, depending on how quickly we're able to put it together. And also talk to Mono County and see what their experience has been as well.
Okay, sounds good. So that's the direction we're going for now, right?
I think that I like that. And I'm hoping with more information and those statistics and data that we still can make some recommendations to the county rather than just kind of say, well, we don't know what to do. What do you want to do?
I don't really have too much concern about that.
Right. Okay.
I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Everybody's good? Okay, we have
I should say we should read this out loud since the public comment came in stating such. All right. Is that okay?
Yeah, if they wanted it read, yes.
Okay. Dear Bishop City Council, thank you for your consideration of banning the sale of flavored tobacco products in the city of Bishop. As you may know, both the town of Mammoth Lakes and the entire unincorporated area of Mono County have passed a flavored tobacco ban. This is to make it more difficult to access by those most vulnerable to the risk and harms of flavored tobacco use. The youth vaping epidemic is a nationwide crisis, and the Eastern Sierra is not immune. I am in strong support of banning the sale of flavored tobacco in the city of Bishop and facilitating a regional approach to preventing tobacco-related death and disease. Nearly 70 California jurisdictions have already restricted the sale of all flavored tobacco products, including menthol, to protect their kids. I urge you to prioritize the safety and well-being of your community over profits from big tobacco. We need your leadership on every aspect of the youth vaping epidemic, now more urgently than ever. Despite enormous progress in reducing smoking, tobacco use is still the leading cause of preventable death in the United States and imposes a terrible toll on families, businesses, and government. Thank you. Respectfully, Lauren Timmeter, Community Health Program Coordinator, Mono County Department of Public Health.
Okay, thank you, Robin.
And no other comments received.
Thank you. Okay, everybody ready to move on? More discussion? How about a property registration ordinance discussion? We're going to Dean for this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this topic came up, I believe, at the previous budget workshop that we had with the city, and a couple of the council members had brought up in the context of regulating properties and their uses and potentially problematic properties and concern over future use of properties in terms of airport coming into the area, staying away from the context of a heavily VRBO'd second owner, vacation ownered or owned a property status, given Bishop's very critical desire to have available housing and the need to make housing units available and to encourage, force somewhere in between commercial property owners to make beneficial use of their properties and not let them sit vacant. In the context of that discussion, there was a concept thrown out there of a vacant property registration ordinance that morphed over time into a concept of possibly a vacant property registration tax or a parcel tax, if you will, that's based or triggered in part on occupancy status. So let me just categorize those two elements briefly for council. Those are two separate discussions. Vacant property registration ordinances are statewide. A lot of cities have them. Their primary focus is code enforcement. You charge anywhere between, $500 to $1,500 a year per parcel that they have to register. And they have to maintain the weeds. They have to, not allow squatters on the property. They can't allow campers on the property. So that ordinance, which is commonplace, but traditionally code enforcement based, can be done. It's a very easy process to do. And if that's the direction from council, then we can go that direction. Again, that conversation morphed into it really, as we understood it, as I understood it from the city attorney's perspective, was not really necessarily entirely concerned with property conditions, weeds and overgrown vegetation and people camping on vacant parcels, but was more concerned about how do we foster, encourage productive use of properties and to prohibit properties from remaining vacant within the city if we can, And so that conversation, again, kind of morphed into a conversation about a parcel tax or a vacant property registration tax. I'm not a tax expert. I have consulted with our contract tax experts. I do know for a fact, I do have that expertise to know that I think there's only 1 or 2 cities at this point who have launched a parcel tax that is occupancy based, meaning that if you decide to leave your property, commercial, residential, whatever it may be zoned, you decide to leave it vacant under what our definition of vacancy is, you would pay then a higher tax rate for that parcel, or a parcel tax would be triggered on that parcel. It's a discussion that's been had. Is that potentially an incentive to property owners to fill a commercial property, to not leave residential properties vacant? In theory, we probably would all agree that that might be an incentive, but my job is to give you the options and analysis from a legal perspective, given the fact that there really are only 1 or 2 other cities that really don't even have their tax in place yet. It's pending. It will go into effect. That could face the city with potential legal challenges to that. And I will kind of close with that introduction to say that if there is a concern about a particular parcel, a particular use, those are things that we as a city attorney's office can look at from an enforcement perspective. I'm not saying I can give you an easy answer, because you've had very smarter attorneys before me that deal with, okay, well, what do we do with Kmart, for example? I'll throw out the white elephant in the room, the big elephant in the room. What do we do with that particular problem property? I think that those have to be, or should be, from a legal perspective, conversations that are had as what do we do with this particular parcel, as opposed to do we put a tax on other parcels to get to where we want to go? And I'm not saying that that is the goal here. I'm not saying that that was ever, it's never been expressed to me that that was the goal in terms of let's target this one property and then have everybody pay for it. But that would be the legal challenge to this tax. And I just have to tell you, and so that's where we're at. I'll stop talking and kind of turn it over to discussion and questions you might all have.
Okay, anybody want to start out?
I'm happy to start out with this one because I've been bringing it up for a while. I mean, so effectively, the problems that I think, so look at the underlying root of the problem, right? And the problems that I think we're trying to address is that we don't want buildings that sit vacant and we have no ability to do anything about it. How many times have we gotten calls about Joseph's? How many times have we gotten calls about, or gotten concerns about the old Kmart building? How many times have people been concerned about the new Kmart building? And being like, well, the city should just take it over. The city should fill in the blank. And we're always in a position where we're like, there's nothing we can do. And so that's, I think, one of the problems that I think we want to be able to address, that is just what can we do to actually give the city more teeth in addressing some of these problem properties. And then the other flip side is that the other issue that I think we need to be planning ahead for is that we already have a housing shortage, and we know what happens when people with a lot of disposable income start coming in to particular areas, like when the airport started going into Mammoth, and now Mammoth has a 67% vacancy rate on their properties. So they have a housing shortage entirely because by construction, because their 67% of their properties are empty. They're used for a couple weeks out of the year and then sit vacant most of the time. And so I was kind of like just brainstorming, like what can we do? And yes, a vacant property registry is a little fine, like, or not it's just a registration fee, as Attorney Pucci pointed out, of the order of like $500 to $1,500 a month. That's
a year,
or a year, yeah, a year, which is kind of just like a slap on the wrist to people that, like, if they leave, if we end up with 67% of our housing inventory empty, our town is dead. And the other reality of it is, like, the majority of our budget, as we discussed, comes from hotel tax and sales tax. And absentee landowners or absentee homeowners aren't contributing to either of those. But if a fire breaks out there, Joe's gonna be there. If the neighbor reports a break-in, Ted's gonna be there. And so Destin's still gonna be like sweeping the leaves. And so in that regard, I want to make sure that the city has some way of being fiscally solvent as we end up with more and more properties that are vacant because of second homeowners. And so, I mean, that was just where I was thinking of how we can kind of kill two birds with one stone by drafting a vacant property tax that would come with it. And of course, yeah, the big one of the big concerns is that it's novel and it hasn't been tested elsewhere. But I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think of, like, how we can start addressing those sorts of issues?
Well, I obviously don't want our town to have a 60% vacancy rate. I don't know, we're not a mountain town like with a big destination resort, you know, in our backyard like Mammoth or Aspen or Vail or any of these other communities. So I don't know if we'll get quite to that point, but sure, you know, we could have second homeowners coming in. But that said, I don't quite agree with the fact that the second homeowners don't contribute to the economy, because typically they're have disposable income and they spend more than maybe a local person might have, like a service worker. So you look at some of the second homeowners in these more resort-based communities, and they are actually, you know, quite big contributors to the local economy by spending heavily at local shops and spending heavily at local restaurants. So I don't know if those two equate. By having second homeowners means that we won't see an injection of cash into our community. I think it's actually a little bit of the opposite, although I'm not advocating for having our community be a community of second homeowners. I think instead of taxing people, I would prefer us to look at alternative solutions. And I think there's two issues you're looking at here. One is vacant commercial buildings, and then there's vacant residential buildings. So I think they're very two separate issues that we should probably address separately. As far as commercial buildings, you know, we do have some, you know, two, now I guess 3 buildings that are very glaring that we can like think about. But I think before we did like a tax, I would like to see the community or the city take a more aggressive approach by talking to the owners and seeing if whatever we can do, because there are going to be unintended consequences of someone, you know, has a building that they own, or maybe they inherited and they don't have time to deal with it, or who knows, all sorts of things might happen. And then we're slapping this tax on them. It also opens up us, as Dean mentioned, up to legal potential issues that I feel like we are in no way prepared to handle if we're one of like the 4 second or third communities that have this parcel tax. So I would prefer us to maybe do some other types of mitigation measures to deal with these vacant buildings before we look at a tax, because I think the unintended consequences on other property owners would be significant. And then as far as the vacant residential properties, you know, we don't have that issue right now. I don't know. Elaine once gave us a number on how many vacant properties we had in our community, and I think it was very, very, very low. Is Elaine on this call? Is she? I remember it being like the vacant, she had come back to us and it was 98% occupancy in the homes that we have in our community. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was low.
Hi, Councilman Schwartz. Sorry, it took me a second to unmute. I don't remember the exact statistic off my head, but you are correct. It was, I think it was potentially even in like the single digits to the number of second homes that we have within city limits.
So I would be, I wouldn't want to address an issue that we don't have when I truly believe that if someone were to buy a second home in Bishop because they want to vacation here, that's money that's coming into our community where they're going to support our local communities. And so I don't agree with you on that point. I think that they will be spent, they have disposable income.
So how I arrived at that is basically you're comparing somebody coming in for 2 weeks out of the year and spending a lot of money versus somebody living here for 52. And so that's where I think that the second homeowner isn't contributing as much to the coffers as somebody who lives here year round. And then my other concern is that, yes, right now we don't necessarily have that problem of second home ownership rate being extremely large and vacant. The moment we have that problem, it's too late to do anything.
Well, I don't know. I mean, California has a huge mandate right now to build more homes. And I think that we could do whatever we could to work with the state to come up with more homes.
Stephen, I know several people who have second homes in Bishop, and they stay here more online with half of the year, back and forth, but they come up here as much as they can. And if they're, you know, they could still make the same income, they'd live here full time. And then, you know, there are a lot of people who buy property that they can stay in sometime, but then it's also income property. And, you know, if we're concerned about taking away menthol cigarettes from someone, taking away that right, I think we should also be concerned that we, you know, we're a capitalistic society, and people invest and buy for the reason of, you know, advancing themselves, and we can't.
But our job is to be the balance between unfettered capitalism and what's good for society. That's our job, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I don't like that argument. But that's just.
But I mean, it's capitalistic to say, well, I should have all the flavored cigarettes I want. Right? What's the difference?
Let's say our occupancy rate did get to, you know, crisis numbers, then I think we could have a serious conversation at that point with DWP and maybe have the state of California at our back, but right now, since we're not at crisis numbers, you know, saying that there's an influx of second homeowners, it isn't accurate. But I think before we go to these extreme measures that other communities haven't done, so one, we're putting ourselves in a precarious position legally, we could, you know, be more proactive, because, you know, you may see something that the rest of us don't, where the writing's on the wall that people are going to start snatching up homes. And let's be more proactive to make housing, I mean, we've talked about it, you know, even higher of a priority.
So we've primarily been discussing a lot on the tax, but what about what Dean was talking about, the commonplace, the property registration ordinance?
So Madam Mayor, in one sense, I think that Councilmember Mahovey had referenced it and everybody's acknowledged that it is a registration ordinance. And so what that means is that if you want to maintain a vacant property in our city, you're allowed to. You just have to comply with the following rules. I think what I'm hearing from a legal perspective is that there's a desire to encourage more productive or any use of certain properties for that matter, as opposed to pay your $1,500 a year and you can maintain your property vacant so long as you clean up the weeds and don't allow graffiti and you don't allow squatters. That's what those ordinances are designed to do. Now, again, there are, as Councilwoman Schwartz had mentioned, there are alternatives. I'm not sure we've actually sat down in a very candid way with the property owners of Kmart and all the players and demanded that they come into town. And we start dropping references like, we might be going to consult with the DA on unfair business practices. We are considering these options. You know, we're trying to create a productive use of this property. Maybe that's already been done and I don't know about that. But the consideration of options such as that, talking to the DA about unfair business practices, revisiting our vacation rental ordinances if we need to do that. I'm not trying to get involved in policy, obviously, that's not my job. But if I can offer a solution in terms of target specific options, then that's what we should be doing as opposed to, well, not as opposed to, in contrast with talking about a widespread brush of a remedy that may just put us in an awkward position if we are really focused on a smaller amount of properties than that widespread brush would affect.
Is Elaine still on the line? Because I know there were a lot of conversations with the owners of Joseph's, the owners of the old Kmart building. And so I guess when Councilwoman Schwartz is talking about what we should be more proactive in that regard, I want to know, like, what do you mean by that actually hasn't been done already?
Well, I mean, if you look, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to let Councilman Mahovey know that I am on the line, but go ahead, Councilman Schwartz.
I mean, if you look at Bishop over the last 10 years, the Cottonwood Plaza was a blight, and it got purchased and redone. You look at the Safeway building where the brewery is now was empty and it's been repurposed into, a hub of the community. You look at Good Earth Yogurt. You look at, I think it's, it's not all going to be perfect all at once, but we can't say that improvement on certain properties hasn't happened. And I think, it's slower than we would like to see. I mean, obviously nobody likes to see an empty Joseph's. I think Kmart is a unique and very challenging situation. But as far as some of the other properties, I think it just takes time and it takes the economy to get people motivated to purchase and put in a profitable business. And I see that happening in our community more than it not happening. It's not like we're seeing more, look at where the Gear Exchange was, a new business and brewery is going in there. So I think it's trending towards more occupancy with smaller, independent, local business owners. And I don't think we need to be a heavy hand in trying to force some of these property owners to do what we want them to do. Because I think we'll have unintended consequences. So I'm sorry, Elaine, for interrupting you.
Not at all. Did you still have questions for me?
Yeah, so how many meetings have you had with the owner of the old Kmart building in the last couple of years?
Well, we had at least one in-person meeting with the owner of the property, and that meeting was with the owner of the Kmart building, and then a representative of his who's interested in doing a project with it. And I've spoken with that individual several times since then. He had a meeting with, a former administrator, David Kelly. He's been introduced to and sat down with Mr. Phillips. And, they're both the owner and this party, at the time, I don't know if things changed due to COVID. They were interested in working on a reuse of the building or the property or some type of redevelopment. But the issue remains that they are tied into a lease with Vons. And that's a very difficult, it's a difficult legal contract for them to break, and it's a difficult financial situation. It's a difficult thing to make pencil as a development because Vons has the lease on the building. And so that, as Councilman Schwartz said, it is unfortunately not super unique to Bishop. They do these practices in other places, but it is a unique circumstance in filling the building. And we don't have much leverage as a city to do anything to change the circumstances of that use. Likewise, we've had many conversations with the new owners of Joseph whenever we have an opportunity to, in Public Works, in the building department, in the planning department. We talk to them about trying to get paper back up in the windows. What will they be doing with the building? How are they going to maintain it? And for a couple of years, we've sort of heard the same answer that they intend to do something. They're going to bring plans into the city. They bring in plans to the building department. It's the same set of plans they submitted before that we couldn't accept. And then, we sort of don't hear from them again for a while, and it perpetuates. So again, it's a private property situation. The city does not have a lot of leverage to do anything with that property. And I think those were the two that you asked about, Councilman Moby.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that's hitting the nail on the head. The phrase that Elaine uttered a couple of times: the city has no leverage. So what leverage can we get? Or do you guys think that the city should have no leverage?
I don't think that the city shouldn't not have leverage. I just think by creating a heavy hand will have unintended consequences on other properties. I think we'll do more harm than help ultimately.
Dean, I'd like to ask you to weigh in. I think you're pretty aware of the current lease and the rules on it and everything. And you had mentioned, I know we've been kind of light-handed and been the nice guy. Let's try and work this out. And what can we do to help? All that kind of stuff. But are you thinking, what kind of battle would it be to go up against Vons and try and take a heavier hand in things?
Well, certainly, we would have to have the legal authority to take a heavy hand. We can't just posture without anything to back us up. And so I certainly would be the last one to put the city in that position. So to Council Members Mohovy's point, I totally understand that, there are some, I have the same concerns from a legal perspective, but we also have to have a basis by which to do that. And I think that under ordinary circumstances, unfortunately, unless you have a budget like Oakland, where Oakland's city council wants to say to their constituents, we value housing above all else, and we're willing to spend $15 million in litigation against the tax organizations to launch this tax, because we want to throw out the investors in our cities that are just maintaining their investments in a vacant parcel, and we've got a homeless population of 60% or something like that. So I don't necessarily think I'll keep it obviously to a legal perspective, that Bishop doesn't have that budget of monies to say we'll defend this whichever way it goes, because this is a principle for the council. I do think that we are a little more of in a unique situation in that some of the properties you're talking about, at least one or two of them, are very high profile. They are potential critical hubs of commercial funding and resources and shopping, and to our citizens that they can't go 5 more miles and find another grocery store or find another market. So there are unique situations that I think play into the situation, at least with one or two of the properties, where the paying of a substantial amount of money just to keep that property empty for the purposes of non-competition with other businesses in the community does smack to me a little bit of some unfair business practices. I'm not saying that the city is on solid ground. I'm not ready to launch a lawsuit against all of those players at this point. But again, I'd rather be focused on, or at least from my perspective, it makes it easier to focus on what are our options vis-a-vis this problem that we have in this city is a different discussion that I've not been a part of up to this point than do we just wide stroke, do we talk about a remedy that's going to affect multiple people, which the council has the right to do. But I'm not sure that anyone would get us to where get the council to where they want to go, in a very short period of time. Even if council was all on board today with a parcel tax, we could be talking about 5, 6, 8, 10 years in litigation before it went into effect, and with challenges. So yes, we're having the conversation. I have to give you the options. Is it a possibility? Sure, you could do it. But I have to also highlight some of those concerns as well. So I don't know, I think, and I didn't mean to downplay Elaine in terms of nobody's talked to Kmart before. That's not the way that meant to come across. But I also know that, sometimes you balance those conversations where it's like, let's be very encouraging from a development perspective. What can the city do to encourage you to do this, as opposed to, the city's going to take a position that what you're doing is borderline or potentially unlawful, and we need to come to the table before we make certain decisions about where we're going to go. That's a different conversation to have, and I would want to make sure we had all of our ducks in a row and we consulted with somebody like the DA, because they oversee those unfair business practices allegations. I have not spoken with Hardy about this at all. I'm not even sure where he would stand on it, but so I don't know if that answered your question, Councilmember Costello, but that's kind of my vague response, if you will.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's kind of, what I wanted to know. And so maybe we can, like I said, we've already just played softball, nice guy, but maybe, sometime soon we could do some good cop, bad cop stuff with them.
If the city were in a better financial position, ultimately what cities decide to do if they're unhappy with a parcel use in their city and they decide for public purposes it needs to be used for something else, is the city initiates eminent domain on the property and buys it. But you're going to be paying market price for that property. I think you probably would have an argument that you had a public purpose in that regard, but that's a whole different conversation that I don't think anybody's poised to have at this moment, budget-wise.
And so to touch on Chris's comment about playing good cop, bad cop, that typically has somebody's broken the law, or there's the implicit assumption that somebody has broken the law, so that's why you're having this good cop, bad cop. What's the law we'd be able to have good cop, bad cop with? There's nothing. There's nothing in our books preventing them from just keeping those properties empty. And that's what I think we should try and do something about. Even if it's like the 0th order of like having them register the vacant properties and subscribe by a set of rules or something like that. Like, I feel like we've heard about these properties for so long. I mean, I think, what is it? The Vaughn's lease is still over 30 years on that one property. And right now we have nothing to like incentivize Joseph's to do anything with it.
But Stephen, Dean was saying that there's no real precedence. There's a couple of cities who are in the process, but still haven't been successful. And
if we can do vacant registration, just like that.
But it could be challenged.
No, vacant registration, no.
No, so what you're talking about now, Stephen, is what Dean was telling us about that is commonplace, right?
Yeah. We could do a vacant registration entirely on our own. That has been done in many other places. It gives us a way to check that they're keeping up to codes or something like that. It's effectively going from like nothing to a slap on the wrist.
I know, and I'm in favor of that as of right now, but it's obvious with our discussion tonight, we're not going to be able to get the big teeth, right now that we want.
Sure.
I think we got a great introductory discussion in it. I'm absolutely in favor of going with the vacant registration right now.
But is there a limit to how much we can charge? Like you're talking about $800, $1,500. Is that something that's legal as well, to just tack on a charge for that?
Yeah, so that has been tried and tested. It is not, there's no questioning a vacant property registration ordinance. Most cities across the state have them these days. And again, it is, if you want to maintain a vacant lot or a vacant parcel, you can't do what Kmart's doing. And frankly, when we create an ordinance, you can also, violation of those ordinances can be punishable in different ways. Not only does somebody have to pay $1,500 or $800 a year to register and to maintain that property, but if they don't comply with the terms of that ordinance, that has teeth on it as well. In terms of civil, possibly even criminal enforcement as a misdemeanor for violations of our municipal code, which most of our codes, if you violate them, are misdemeanors. So it does have that, and that is one of those where it's kind of a no-brainer in terms of we can do it, it's easy. Does it make a big difference to somebody that wants to maintain a vacant parcel? They'd be happy to pay the $1,800 and a property management company to take care of it. That's a different discussion. Whether that's going to have an effect on the target properties or some of the more major problematic properties that the city has is yet to be seen. But it does set a standard for maintaining vacant properties. It does set a baseline for the authority. Right now, as you all heard, we're talking about weeds at the Kmart parking lot and a window broken and alarms going off for 2 weeks for those of you who haven't heard there. So that's just one area where if we don't have to, that's just basic property maintenance. And so it is one step in that direction of being able to regulate vacant parcels and unoccupied properties. Is it the ultimate solution? No. But I think that we can have further discussions. My background at the entire firm is how do we force property owners, how do we tackle major problematic properties? So we can look at it from that perspective. But again, it is a difficult situation when you're talking about forcing private property owners to engage in development that they don't want to engage in.
So how does everybody feel about going with the vacant property registration ordinance at this time?
I mean, I'm all for it. I'd even get some iron knuckles out, but yes.
Okay, Karen, Chris?
Yeah, I
just think if we had a huge, go ahead, Chris. If we had we have a few problematic properties that, to me, we're trying to address with this ordinance, which I think it will adversely affect some of the property owners that are trying to potentially rent their buildings, or someone that inherited a building. Or I think if it was like a widespread blight issue that we had in our community, then I would be for it. But I feel like it's a select few properties. And right now, property owners are they're the ones that are hurting the most in this pandemic because there's no relief from any governmental program for property owners right now. And to slap something like this on them on top of what they're already dealing with, to me, seems unfair.
Yeah, I see what you mean, Karen, other than the fact that this is commonplace and it's something that we're actually in the minority, of cities and communities that we're not already doing this. This is just part of owning a property, is how I see it.
If we had a problem, if we had like a major problem, I would say, let's do it. But we have some problem properties, but we don't have a widespread problem. So that's my take. And actually we have people like investing in our community with the types of businesses that we want, like, people like that, the old Gear Exchange was purchased by locals and is turning into a local business. Like, we want to incentivize people to do that. We don't want to disincentivize people with something that I don't think is gonna change what we want to be changed.
But I would say, Karen, that's where we can craft the ordinance to address those sorts of issues. We can we could do something like waiving your registration fee if you're making it available to public, waiving your registration fee if you're actively trying to sell it or rent it, et cetera, or if you're actively improving it, something like that. We have the power to make this sort of an ordinance fair, don't we, Gene?
Yeah, and maybe this is, I hate to use this again, but maybe this is a middle ground here. Our council can give us direction, staff direction, bring us back some options. If we've narrowed down the discussion from a parcel tax that's going to apply to every vacant parcel to a vacant property registration ordinance at this point, and then we'll deal with individual properties on an individual basis as we need to, if we can. Then we can bring back to you, and here's what I would do is I would tell my team, I want to give Bishop City Council a spectrum. What is the most vanilla looking property registration ordinance to what is the most aggressive in the history of property registration ordinances? And maybe we can find a happy medium there where individual council members can say, I'm uncomfortable with that aspect of it. I like that aspect of it, and can tailor that ordinance to how you think it needs to fit Bishop.
Well, that sounds perfect, Dean, as long as that's not too cumbersome for your team.
Nothing is ever too cumbersome for my team.
I mean, we have seen that our legal costs have gone up.
Is vacant property just commercially zoned, or is it somebody's second home? What defines a vacant property?
I was going to suggest that rather than do a widespread thing, that it just be commercial, because I've seen what Karen is saying about people that inherit a property or, bought it as an investment for when they retire, and they've got 10 years before they retire, and so they're coming up on their vacations to mow the lawn and, fix something. But are we going to, those people that are already just, maybe hanging on by a thread, are we going to make it to where they then have to turn around and sell it? And so, and maybe we can have just a different set of rules. Like Stephen said, I like the thing of being gracious, of really making it something that affects the people who just don't care. But what's hard is, $1,500 a year to Vaughn's is like a 0.25% sales tax for everybody else. It might help, but so I'd be more open to have it be just commercial than a residential as well.
So I'll have to get back to you in our council in terms of whether that's possible or not. I don't have that answer for you right now. But what we can do in very short order, and Councilmember Mohobie I'll do the initial work under the retainer, so you're not billed hourly for it if that's the concern for our billings.
but is to bring back to council what are the realm of possibilities. I've heard all the questions, I've heard all the concerns. Now I'm narrowing it down, at least in part, to a vacant property registration ordinance. So we will bring you the spectrum of options, present that in a way that everybody can make a decision once they have the options in front of them, and as opposed to this hypothetical discussion as to what we could or could not do or can do.
Okay, everybody good with that?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, ready to move on?
Sure.
How would anybody like to discuss coronavirus?
I think we should tax it.
I think we should consider it COVID a bad word. We should ban the word COVID. Okay, so Mr. Phillips, I believe, and back to Mr. Pucci, right?
Thank you. I'll lead off on this. I think I mentioned already during the budget workshop that the governor's May revised budget has $450 million in it for cities under 500,000. So we'll be following that, see if that stays in the budget and what it might bring to us. In the last 2 weeks, I think we're on day 38 now. And that's very, very positive. The county has been able to move into phase 2 of stage 2. So retail stores are opening, restaurants are opening under the county health officer guidelines. And we are, as we discussed, we're working to find a way to allow for restaurants to have outdoor seating on some expanded public space adjacent to their place of business. I think from the governor's message at noon today, it sounds like we'll be moving to phase 3 soon. And right now the state is developing guidelines for hair and nail salons and barbershops to open fairly soon. So that'll be a positive step. I'll be able to get a haircut. One thing that I wanted to discuss with you is I think we're at the point where we can consider opening City Hall to the public. And if the council's agreeable, we'll work towards doing that next Monday. Anybody have any objection to that? It would be in the office as we're doing now when we're at our desks. We do not have to wear masks, but if we get up and move to other parts of the office, we do wear masks. The public would be required to wear a mask if they come into City Hall. And we're now doing regular cleaning and so on. So I think we'd be good to be able to open City Hall to the public.
I saw you had a temperature infrared thing that you didn't have to touch the skin. Is that something you'd be required to do when people come in, or is that just for the staff?
Well, it's mainly for the staff. I don't know that we, if there's a further peak of cases, then I think we would start doing that for the public. But I'm not sure that we need to at this point. That's my opinion. But
as far as I know, that the churches are going to be required to take people's temperatures before we let them in. It's interesting.
Well, I think that that's a case where you're going to have more people in one area than we would see in City Hall. But I'd be glad to do that if you think it's necessary.
I would rather we did not. I mean, how often do we have people, obviously, you know, we're a long time, like you said, 38 days without a positive case. And so, you know, how many times do we have people from out of our area come into City Hall?
Ron, I think the masks and the screens that you guys have are sufficient.
We are going to put up a screen at the front counter where Carrie works. That'll be another possible barrier.
One option also might be, I know I was not asked for my opinion, but I frequently speak when I'm not. One option is also to ask Dr. Richardson what his advice is, and we can decide what we want to do, if we want to follow that or not. But he is the county health director. I suppose the county is going to have to figure out what their policy is going to be to open up the county facilities as well. And at least it'd be interesting to see what his take would be in terms of temperature checking. We can do it on public, we can do it on employees, but I'm not a doctor, so I can't give that advice.
I think that the county courthouse is going to be open to the public sometime this week. And I am familiar with the Dr. Richardson's guidelines on office space, and it doesn't mention taking temperatures. But we can check on that.
Okay. So we're good with going by his suggestions, everybody?
I mean, my take is, yeah, we should follow his suggestions and whatever staff at City Hall is comfortable with.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So I'd be happy to let the staff decide.
Okay. You good with that, Mr. Phillips?
I'm good with that. I think in the police department, they probably would continue pretty much the way they've been doing now. People can come into the lobby area, but there's glass barriers and so on. You want to speak to that, Ted?
Yeah, we're still very well protected. When folks walk into the PD lobby, there are barriers all the way around, and then when they leave, we go out and disinfect. So we're going to continue doing that for probably a long time. It's just the nature of our work and how the lobby is currently set up.
Okay. It sounds like we're good with that. We'll wait and see what health officer has to say. And then another item would be whether or not we're going to continue with Zoom meetings for city council meetings, meet in person. You know, things are changing rapidly. So maybe by the time we have our next council meeting, you know, guidelines could very well be different. But I think I heard Karen, and I agree with, if we had to keep masks on the entire meeting, if we were in council chambers, I would be in favor of staying with Zoom. If we could take them off once we all sit down so that we can talk, you know, into the microphones and whatnot, then I'm in favor of meeting in person. How does everybody else feel?
I like those guys.
I agree with that sentiment.
Work.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I sent an email message this afternoon to the county health folks asking that question, and I've not responded yet, so I'll let you know.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Anybody have anything else COVID wise? Nope, we're good. Okay. Future agenda items, anybody? We have our list, right?
Nope. I don't have
Okay.
any. So.
Not hearing anything. Okay.
And Mayor, just so you know, there hasn't been any new comments in the last couple of items, so
Oh,
no public comment.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Karen, do you have anything to report?
There was an SCOG meeting, but I missed it. My mom passed away a week and a half ago, so I was completely gone for the last 2 weeks and haven't been really participating in much city stuff. And unfortunately, Jim isn't here to report on it. And then our ESTA meeting was canceled. So that's it.
Yeah. My heart was definitely with you, Karen.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Stephen, do you have anything?
There were nothing to report from the last 2 weeks, but before our next council meeting, we'll have planning commission interviews, and we're going to finalize the LAFCO budget for the year, which city's contribution will be 10 grand this year, which is down. So
we made a nice compromise.
we did.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Chris, do you have anything?
Yeah, so I participated in the interviews for the Park Commission. We had 3 people. They all really wanted it. I'm not sure if, I think at the next meeting, we'll tell you what our recommendation is for who. It was someone that applied last time and was second runner-up then. Also, real quickly on the Owens Valley Groundwater Authority, not real happy with some of the stuff that's been happening. You know, we are in a low priority basin and are not required to make a groundwater sustainability plan, but are going ahead with it because that could change at any time. And, you know, one of my big pushes to the staff was that rather than raise everybody's funding because we had people that dropped out, was to just live within our means, have less meetings, quit having the consultants fly in and give us, you know, reports or teach us about how water works. And they all agreed. And then basically was saying, you know, are we going to have to require people to pay? And they said, no one has to pay more money, making it sound like they weren't going to ask for it. Well, the very next meeting they asked, and you know, you guys sided with me saying we don't want to pay more than we're already paying, almost 60 grand a year to be a super voter. And to my surprise, both Mono County and Inyo County, their board said, yes, we'll pay more. And so now I call them super duper voters because they have a little higher percentage of votes than we do. The good thing is they pretty much vote the way we do, and so it's not a worry that, you know, they're going to change the direction of what we want, you know, radically. But at the same time, Meadow Creek Water Association is wanting to join, and they're wanting to have 2 votes, and they're not wanting to pay any money. And I was pretty adamant, you know, and I almost said, well, the city of Bishop wants to retain all our votes and pay half the amount as well. I didn't, but it looks like it's leaning towards, I think they finally voted to say they could pay half for the 2 votes. Anyhow, so that's kind of what's going on. Is a little bit of, there's been a few entities that have gotten in, have 1 vote as interested parties. One of them is the Lone Pine Indian Tribe, and the other one, I forget, Destin or Ron, I don't know if you remember the other entities that now are on the board and have a vote, but that's where we stand with that.
Okay, thank you. Just have the upcoming LAFCO meeting, and just the community, I think, as a whole has really unified together. We have differences of opinion, but for the most part, you know, just like we usually do, the city of Bishop, people are cordial, people are kind, and for the most part, and respectful. So even though we, you know, have different ideas, but it's starting to come together, and I'm just, you know, let's just continue to stay hopeful, be good to each other, and let's just be positive, and hopefully we just keep moving forward and forward. And thank you, Keith, for joining us tonight.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I have one thing I'd like to add real quick.
Yeah.
For council members and for the public as well. I guess there was somebody posted on a website that the city told the veterans that they couldn't put up flags for Memorial Day. And so we really got a bad rap about that. And, I looked into it, and it's not true at all. Basically, what we found out was the American Legion, who's in charge of doing that, decided not to put the flags up. So just so everybody knows, that wasn't a decision made by the city. Our veterans and those who have given their life for our country honored in that way. And we do honor.
Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that, Chris. As a matter of fact, I had received a phone call from the lady from the American Legion, and she wanted to know what I thought, that, she'd been told by some people they shouldn't do it. I thought it was a wonderful idea, because right now people need that hope and encouragement and just positive, and it's a tradition. And then when it didn't happen, I was really surprised. So the only thing I can figure is the people who thought that they shouldn't do it must have, had their way. And I'm not exactly sure why it didn't happen, but the city did not have anything to do with that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really, really, really hoping that we can go with the fireworks show for the 4th of July celebrations, because people need something. We need to, come together carefully and celebrate and have that just national tradition, and have something positive and hopeful right now. So I'm certainly hoping it can happen. I believe it is going to happen. So on that note, we are going to adjourn until our meeting on Monday, June 8th, 2020 at 6 o'clock. And thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thanks.
Night, everyone.
Night.
Night, night.